Hey, everybody. Welcome. We have got plenty to talk about tonight. It's going to be yet another great late night chat. Let's go.
Spoken of the American century. I say that the century on which we are entering can be and must be the century of the common man.
A radical redistribution of economic power.
I mean, we know that racism is a byproduct of capitalism. Everything would be all right if everything was put back in the hands of the people.
We need a government that will make sure Americans are taken care of and organize the economy to serve the people, not the profits of a wealthy few.
We now have the techniques and the resources to get rid of poverty.
We got to start getting out there with the people.
Get out of the movement and get to the masses.
We need a government of action.
Welcome, everybody. I am so glad to be here with all of you tonight. Obviously, things in the world not going for the best, but you know, what else is new? I mean, we're still living under imperialism and imperialism's desperate viciousness. We're going to talk about all of that tonight. But if you are watching this, we're doing the same thing we've been doing since the beginning, pretty much. First, the opening remarks, then the roll call, and then I answer your questions for the remainder of the night. Now, the best way to send questions still is to go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. That's the best way to send your questions because I get all of that money for the most part, and it comes instantly. That's my preferred way, but we are monetized again. Hey, can't complain. YouTube is allowing super chats. So if you want to send a super chat, that's great. You can also do Rumble rants if you're on the Rumble. You can cash at me at Caleb Maupin 22. But the best way is still buy me a coffee. I do buy me a coffee questions that come in during the show first, and I'll do the ones that came in before the show started. I'll do those first. Then we'll do super chats and other questions. And hey, you know, I'm not complaining. If YouTube wants to allow me to be monetized, you know, good for them. Good for them. I'm not going to complain, but you know, who knows? Who knows how long that'll last? You know, we fight to be on every platform. And so we're glad to be monetized. You know, send a super chat, send a Rumble rant. Best thing to do would be to send to buy me a coffee. In terms of announcements, there's going to be a big announcement tonight, a very big announcement tonight. Let me emphasize that again. There's going to be a very big announcement tonight. Big, huge, large, massive announcement for our community. But I'm not giving that away yet. But I do have this announcement that you're used to if you've been watching lately, which is that we're having our national 7-day training program. That is coming up in the month of August. So please go register for that program. It's going to be a lot of fun. So please register today for the program. If you would like to join us in the Chicago area for a 7-day training program in anti-imperialism in August 12th through 19th, that is happening. The organization behind all of this is the Center for Political Innovation, CPI. We're a great organization, a community of people dedicated to building a new America beyond the global imperialist financial system. A new America where communities come first, a government of action that fights for working families. Yep, that's us, the Center for Political Innovation, and we are the cutting edge. I can tell you there's a lot of great stuff going on. I mean, you know, we were the first out of the gate popularizing Ibrahim Traore. We hit the streets of Chicago last summer with a big banner of Ibrahim Traore Penny, our member, wrote a beautiful book about Ibrahim Traore. And just this weekend, our members, they were out in California in Altadena, and they went to a workshop, and they were selling T-shirts. And what were these people that we knew nothing about selling T-shirts with the face of Ibrahim Traore on them? Would you believe it or not? I tell people, Center for Political Innovation, we are the political velvet underground in terms of classic rock and roll. You know, before the Rolling Stones and the Beatles did it, Lou Reed and Nico and the Velvet Underground did it first. And that's us. We are out of the gate. We were talking about Uhuru when they got raided by the FBI. A week after they were raided, they were on the stage at a CPI convention. We were standing in solidarity with them. We were out there saying only peace can make America great again, boosting the peace message within the Trump camp. We were out there promoting Ibrahim Traore. We have just been on the vanguard ahead of everything. So if you want to be where it's at, if you want to be the bee's knees of anti-imperialism, is that a thing people used to say back in the 1920s, bee's knees, you got to join CPI, because we're doing it for real, and we are a great organization. And I'm going to tell you some great stuff. Like I said, big announcement tonight. You got to wait and hear it, Jared. You got to wait for the big announcement and hear it. You got to wait. You got to wait. But if you all have questions, the best way to send questions is still going to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. That is still the best way to send your questions. Someone, an anonymous coffee question was sent last night about religion, and I will be answering that question first, and I will answer the Buy Me a Coffee questions first. You get first dibs, the Buy Me a Coffee people. I'll do super chats. We can do super chats now. We're monetized. We can do super chats. We can also do Rumble rants. You can cash at me at Caleb Maupin 22. So questions are permitted and appreciated. So we're just going to have a normal stream tonight. First, we're going to talk about Thomas Massie's loss in Kentucky, and we're going to talk about what that means. Then we're going to talk about today's indictment issued by the U.S. Department of Justice against Raul Castro. And then we're going to talk about the big news. So first things first, our community, if you're part of the channel here, if you're part of our community here, we're all horrifically disappointed with the news we woke up to this morning, or a lot of us knew it was going to happen last night. That Thomas Massie, the great anti-war member of Congress from Kentucky, who has stood his ground and opposed Israel, been called out by Trump for opposing Israel, fought for Americans' civil liberties, and opposed Israel, opposed the war against Iran, opposed every war. He lost the Republican primary in the state of Kentucky in his district. And I saw the news this morning, and I had a few minutes this morning. I actually made a video this morning giving my reaction. And I just filmed it on the streets of New York City. I was walking down the street, listening to different news, listening to different people's analysis of it. And I started doing some research into the demographics of the district. And so on the streets of New York City, I filmed this video. And I figured, okay, CPI people would share it or whatever. This video is still getting shared. This video has been retweeted 39 times. I have gotten libertarians from all over the country, Thomas Massie fans from all over the country are sharing this video, telling me how much they love it. I will show you. I did not expect this video to just hit home as well as it did. So these were my off-the-cuff thoughts this morning as I was walking through the streets of New York. Thank goodness it is finally summertime. Summertime at the end of May. I was walking through the streets of New York City, and I made a video about the loss of Thomas Massie in Kentucky and what I felt it was about. I'm going to show you that video, and then I'll show you some of the responses I got, and I'll expound upon it further. Here we go. Hey, folks. So everyone's reacting to the fact that Thomas Massie lost the Republican primary as an important voice in the U.S. Congress opposing Israel. He was unseated. The Israel lobby spent huge amounts of money, and a pro-Israel Republican won the Republican primary against Thomas Massie. Now, people are having different reactions to it. A lot of true things are being pointed out. For example, Thomas Massie won largely among younger people, but it was older folks who turned the tide and secured Thomas Massie's defeat. And people pointed out younger people tend to get their information from podcasts, whereas older people tend to get their information from Fox News. And so the younger generation of Republicans that listen to social media and podcasts, they were outvoted by the older generation. They get their information from mainstream media outlets, from Fox News, etc. Now, there's a little bit more to it than that, because I actually looked into Thomas Massie's district. And, you know, in Thomas Massie's district in Kentucky, there are only 40 people in the entire district who are Jewish. Did you know this? In this district in Kentucky, only 40 people are Jewish. So why would anybody in Thomas Massie's district support Israel? Well, largely because they are evangelical Christians. And many evangelical Christian churches teach that it is your duty to support Israel no matter what. And these evangelical churches are not organizations people join because they're looking for some kind of niche ideology. Rather, they're organizations that exist in the community, providing services, providing a place for people to belong while teaching their ideology. And it is through building up these centers of community power that evangelical Christians have been able to largely send out a message of pro-Israel support from people that are not deeply political, people that are not getting into podcasts. You have to remember, social media can be very niche. You find what you're looking for. It gets you down a very specific rabbit hole. And that at the end of the day, it wasn't the very rabbit hole specific people that turned the tide in the Republican primary in Kentucky. The tide was turned by people that were just ordinary people living their lives who happen to be part of an evangelical church that tells them that they need to support Israel. And so they do. And that's really important to remember. What we need now more than ever is a movement in America with a real base among the community that is espousing anti-imperialism and anti-colonialism, not a podcast. And that is what we urgently need. And you'll notice that the organizations like mine, the Center for Political Innovation, that have advocated that, we have been targeted worse than anyone. And the Uhuru movement that has built that among African Americans, they were targeted by the FBI because they were building that. There is a real fear on the part of the deep state of a real movement among the population, community centers, organizations that bring people together, bring in people who would never go looking for this message, and empower them, get them involved in community activities, and teach anti-colonialism and anti-imperialism. That is the biggest fear of the ruling powers right now, because that is the way that they would be defeated. And no, I'm not talking about people going to other people's events and taking selfies of themselves, taking pictures of themselves and saying that, oh, we're anti-imperialists and we're volunteering, but actual centers of community power that are doing real outreach and real work in the community that espouse an anti-imperialist political line. That is what is urgently needed right now. And at the end of the day, if there had been centers of community power in Thomas Massie's district that were educating people about anti-imperialism, and people who weren't looking for anti-war or anti-imperialist messages and podcasts, people that were just trying to live their lives, were brought into centers of community power that espoused anti-imperialism, things would be very different. At the end of the day, it's always about the balance of forces. And even though public opinion has largely turned against Israel and its crimes, at this point there is no movement in America. There is no movement with a base among the population, organizing people that can espouse that position. We need to build an anti-imperialist apparatus in America, and that's what the Center for Political Innovation is dedicated to building. And we're going to keep trying to build that, and that's why we have been so viciously targeted. We are trying to build a real community of people that are dedicated to anti-imperialism. And it's not easy. It's not an easy thing to do, but we're going to keep doing it, and we're going to keep organizing, and I hope you'll get involved with us. But at the end of the day, we need a movement. We need a movement, and that's what Thomas Massie's defeat made very, very clear. Only a mass movement is going to strengthen anti-imperialism in America. We need a mass movement. We don't need more podcasts. We don't need more social media drama and hashtags. We need to build a movement, and that is what we at the Center for Political Innovation are building, and that is what will lead to moving against imperialism. Yeah, so that was my video, and I will expound on it a little bit further. I did not expect the reaction I would get to the video. This was probably the best response, and this is from Josh Evans, who is a licensed counselor and social worker in Kentucky. He said, "Kentucky, in my whole life here, you're spot on. Not sure who you are, but bullseye. I've lived and worked in the districts for 6 my whole life. I know these people as much as I can. Well, culturally and religiously, you are spot on. Now, that is a very solid endorsement. This guy is a mental health worker who talks to people in this district for a living. He says, I know exactly what I'm talking about. Now, I didn't grow up in Kentucky. I grew up in Ohio, but I travel around the country for my job as a journalist. I talk to people. I do know what I'm talking about. And basically, to reiterate what I said in the video, to put it in some different words, this is the thing that if we're going to build a real movement to stop U.S. support for Israel, to stop wars, etc., if we're going to build such a real movement in America, we need to be aware of a certain reality, which is this district in Kentucky that this guy is very familiar with. It says my analysis is spot on, that I'm totally correct about, right? Is a red or Republican district. Most people who live there, why do you think they are Republicans? Do you think they are Republicans because they studied the life of Abraham Lincoln? They studied the life of Horace Greeley. They studied the work of Milton Friedman and Irving Kristol and came to the conclusion that the neoconservative Republican perspective was the best when it came to economics and culture. No, of course not. Most people in that district are Republican because their neighbors are Republicans, their parents, their family members are Republicans, people they work with are Republicans, the people at their job are Republicans, the people they go to school with are Republicans, the people at their church are Republicans, so they're Republicans. And that's not to put them down, because I live in New York City and I live in Brooklyn. And here in Brooklyn, it is overwhelmingly Democrats. And are the people here Democrats because they studied the work of Thomas Jefferson and Andrew Jackson and came to the conclusion that John F. Kennedy and Barack Hussein Obama had the best theories about the Democratic leadership? No, most people that live here in Brooklyn, where I live, vote Democrat and consider themselves Democrats because their parents are Democrats, because their family members are Democrats, because the people they work with are Democrats, because the people that they go to church with are Democrats, because the people that they work with are Democrats, the people that they go to school with are Democrats, and so they're Democrats. Most people don't take politics in the same way that we take it here. You're here because you're not like these people. Okay, you're just not. You are somebody for whom politics is a very niche interest. You are on an obscure podcast by an obscure guy. I'm the RT guy in America. I'm the leader of the Center for Political Innovation. I've met Russian President Vladimir Putin. I've met the president of Iran, Ibrahim Raisi. I sat a face-to-face interview with him. I've done all kinds of stuff. I'm an anti-imperialist figure in America, the leader of the Center for Political Innovation. We're on the, you could say we're not in the mainstream of American politics, especially when it comes to foreign policy. So if you're watching this right now, you are not like most people. You're just not. And there's nothing wrong with that. I'd say you're better in some ways. You're exceptional. You're not a freak. You're not a weirdo. You're actually somebody who is so interested in politics that you dig into topics very deeply, you investigate, and good for you. But the challenge for us is, what about all the people who don't do that? What about all the people that, you know, they vote Democrat because everyone they know is a Democrat? Why not? They vote Republican because everyone they know is a Republican. Why not? What about those people? Right? What about them? You know, how do we relate to those people? Well, in Thomas Massie's district, which is Republican, you know, it was divided. There's a large amount of the people there that like Thomas Massie's libertarian, anti-war and anti-Israel perspective, but there's a lot of evangelical Christians. I was blown away. There are only 40 Jews in his entire district, which I think is, I mean, again, it's not surprising, right? You know, if you look at the way the Jewish population of America is concentrated in different areas, that kind of makes sense, but there's only 40 Jews in his entire district. But there are a lot of evangelical Christians. And again, you know, there you have a lot of Republicans, especially younger Republicans, who don't get their news from Fox. They get their news from podcasts. It means they're watching Tucker Carlson, maybe a little Candace Owens, maybe Ben Shapiro, but they're getting social media politics, whereas the older generation are getting television politics. So they're watching Fox, maybe reading the Wall Street Journal, owned by the same company, News Corporation. But the younger generation, they're listening to Tucker Carlson. They're listening to Candace Owens. They're listening to Ben Shapiro. They're listening to, I don't know, the conservative podcast sphere. They're more anti-Israel. However, they're not the ones that decided the elections at the end of the day. The elections were ultimately decided by the people for whom politics is not their main thing. Politics, they just want to raise their kids. They want to raise a family. They're thinking about, their kids' little league baseball game. They're thinking about social drama at their high school. They're thinking about, trying to make sure they can pay the bills in our economy that is ridiculously bad with these gas prices that are going up. And yeah, they think about politics and, and they tend to lean conservative, and they attend a church. Church is a big part of life. I grew up, I'm from a pretty liberal family, but I grew up in a small town in Ohio, and church was our life. We went to church on Sunday morning. We went to church again, youth group on Sunday evening. We went to church on Wednesday evening. It was 3 times a week. And I went to Bible summer camp. When I was a kid, I went to my grandmother's Bible summer camp, which was at a Lutheran church. Then I got older, I went to my church's Bible summer camp. And that church is just a big part of life. And it is the institution. And in Kentucky, in this district, a lot of the people for whom politics is not really their thing, church is a big part of their life. And for the church they attend tells them, we support Israel here. We support Israel here. Thomas Massie doesn't support Israel, so vote for the other guy. And they're not going to get on the internet and do a huge amount of research, and they're not going to open up the Israel-Palestine thing. They're just thinking, okay, this church that, has a good youth group for my kids, that is a great place to socialize, that gives me an optimistic message about forgiveness and redemption and the blood of Christ. They say to vote for the pro-Israel guy. I'll do that, no problem. And that is what anti-imperialists, those of us who understand, those of us who do think deeply about these things, we have to understand not everyone is like us. And that if you go to countries, and this is why I've made so many people mad. Not going to talk about that too much tonight, but I have been to countries where they have a real anti-colonial movement. I'm not going to show the whole video tonight. I'm just going to show you a little bit of the video. I have been to Venezuela. I was in Venezuela in 2015, and I went to central Caracas, which is the hardcore center of the Bolivarian socialist movement. I'll show you, right? I'll show you some of what I saw in Venezuela. Let me find you the video. This was a birthday party, right? And we were going through the hardcore neighborhood. What is it called? The February 22nd neighborhood. It's the solid core. This is the part of Caracas that does not vote for the United Socialist Party of Hugo Chavez. They vote for the Communist Party because they think the United Socialist Party is not hardcore enough. They vote for the Communist Party, right? And this is in a commune where these people, like, their property, they're living in homes that are owned by a collectivo. They actually, the area I went to, they have a radio station that is sponsored by Iran and had a big picture of Ahmadinejad in it. And so I went through the neighborhood, and this is what I saw. I went by a birthday party in the middle of the commune, right? These Venezuelans were having a birthday party, right? Now, what is that? That's a mural of Che Guevara. They're in the center of a Marxist Leninist commune in Venezuela, right? This is they're in the center of the hardcore, but they're just having a birthday party, right? They're just having a birthday party, and they got a mural of Che Guevara there. And I don't even know what it says. I don't speak Spanish enough to know what it says. That's Che Guevara, and they're just having a birthday party.
This here.
Yeah. And the reason that I'm bringing this up is because in Central Caracas, this neighborhood that is a stronghold of the Communist Party, has been for decades, even before Hugo Chavez, those are the normal people, right? The kind of people that, the kind of people that are, in Kentucky would be going to an evangelical church and voting against Thomas Massie, not because they're like fanatical Israel supporters, but just because, hey, that's my church. In Central Caracas, they're voting for the Communist Party, and they're huge supporters of Maduro and Hugo Chavez because they're in the neighborhood, and the institution that provides them a place, right, a place to have their birthday party is sponsored by the Bolivarian government, and they're living in housing provided by a Bolivarian commune, and it's in their neighborhood providing services. And yeah, they're probably not like intensely political, right? When I walk through these neighborhoods, I talked to people about what it was like, and they said before the revolution, none of these houses had running water and electricity. We used to live in shacks without running water and electricity. And after Hugo Chavez came in, we all got interest-free loans to build our houses. And all of our houses are electrified, and we have free cooking gas and free heating gas in the wintertime. And, and our neighborhood has really, really improved because of the revolution. And, Hugo Chavez won the election, and he just started using the government to build up the economy, and our lives got better. So we vote for the Communist Party. And we vote for Hugo Chavez because they're in the neighborhood. These are normal people who there is a revolutionary organization in their community, is providing services. And that's what a real revolutionary movement is about. And, when I was in Iran, I saw the same thing, right? I went to neighborhoods that were hardcore supporters of the supreme leader, hardcore supporters of the hardliner faction, where every woman is wearing a black hijab, and it's only her face. That's the more conservative people, right? The law says in Iran that you only have to have like a headscarf on the top of your head, but the women who have their face, it's only their face showing. I mean, those are the very religious women. I went to those neighborhoods, and again, those people, there's a minority of people that have studied the ideology of the Islamic Revolution intensely, have joined the Islamic Revolutionary Guards, but that's not everybody. And most people there, it's like, look, the Revolutionary Guards provide services in the neighborhood. Before the revolution, this neighborhood didn't have electricity. Before the revolution, we didn't have telephone service in this neighborhood, and they brought it in there. They're doing a good job, and they just kind of want to live their lives. And a lot of them, maybe they like American movies. Maybe they disagree with this or that about the revolution, but the government, the revolutionary movement in Iran has taken care of them and has done good for the community. And so they support them. And that's real revolutionary movements that have what you call a base among the population. That's how they operate. And in America, right, revolutionary movements, they don't have that. In American revolution, in America, the communist groups are all a very, very niche thing, and they're getting more and more detached from anything going on in the anti-imperialist countries. And people that are opposing Israel, it's either it's very extreme woke people, or it's people on the right that are very much into certain podcasts and all of that. But you don't have a mass base. And what we urgently need is to build a mass base for anti-imperialism in America. That is what is urgently needed. We need an organization that is in neighborhoods and in communities, providing services, meeting people who would never find this podcast online, because looking for this YouTube channel would never even occur to them. Finding people that are not the kind of people that would go looking for this, but reaching them, providing services, providing community while teaching this ideology. That is what needs to happen. And that's not something you can do overnight. And please don't. If there's anyone in the chat who's thinking about saying, well, Caleb, I heard about this other group on the internet that does. No, they don't. They go to other people's stuff. They go to evangelical churches that support Israel and help their canned food drive and take selfies of themselves. They don't do this, okay? They're a social media brand. So please don't put, oh, Caleb, there's other groups doing it. No, they're not. No, they're not. And they're assholes. Those people can't even get along with me. So how do you think they're going to win over the masses of people? And that needs to be pointed out too, right? These communist groups are so detached from reality and so detached from average Americans. These folks can't even get along with me. So I agree with them about foreign policy. I have studied Marx and all that. They can't even get along with me. So you think they're going to get along with the people in your neighborhood? You think they're going to get the people in Thomas Massie's district would ever listen to them? I don't think so, right? If I'm not even good enough for these people, they're never going to organize to these people. So please don't get me down that rabbit hole. But regardless, right? If we're going to have a real anti-imperialist movement in America, we need to build a base among the population. There is only one organization in America that is successfully doing that. One. And it's an organization that is only doing it among Black people because of their political line. And I respect that. And that is their right, right? They have a right to organize however they want. Black people in America have been oppressed. I mean, you know, there's a lot of like grandstanding. People don't realize the conditions Black people have been up against. You know, Angola in Louisiana was like a death camp. You know, it was like an Auschwitz for Black people that, you know, they would work slaves to death. Millions of slaves died in Angola. You know, I mean, slavery, like rape of women was just a constant reality because they were considered property. You know, slave masters were allowed to rape their slaves, and they had a special law in the South that if you raped somebody else's slave, that was called trespassing. But it's like the genocidal conditions that Black people have been subjected to. And then you go down the line with the lynchings, the ugly, like carnival atmosphere of ripping people's bodies apart and the conditions that Black people have been subjected to are very, very extreme, right? And changing the name of a street doesn't change that. You know, and changing the name, you know, having a bunch of members of Congress put on a dashiki or whatever doesn't change that, right? So the Black community, that is very much, they are, you know, they're isolated. They live in certain areas, you know, the income, they have the right to organize separately if they choose that. Now they have the right to integrate if they want to too. And I am not, as a white person, going to go to Black people and say, no, you should have your own country. No, I'm not going to do that. If Black people want to separate and have their own territory, they should have the right to that territory. But at the same time, I'm not going to force that on them. You know, historically in America, there have been movements for the Black Belt, the independence of the Black Belt. They want the Republic of New Africa, etc. But if Black people don't want that, I'm not going to force that on them. And right now in America, there is a minority of Black people that do want an independent Black Republic. And I believe this organization I'm talking about, they're not one of them. They don't want an independent Black Republic. They have a different vision of what they call African internationalism. But regardless, they are an anti-imperialist group, and they have a base in two cities. In two cities, they have a big community center. I've been to both of them now. I'd only been to the one in Florida. Now I've been to the one in St. Louis, and they're called the Uhuru Movement, the African People's Socialist Party. They have a base, and they are a real anti-imperialist organization, and they support Maduro, they support Russia, they support China, and they have a base, and that's why the FBI has gone after them like you would not believe. They have been targeted because they have a base, because they are a real organization. And that's why the FBI went after them. And as soon as the FBI went after them, I immediately, did everything I could to support them. A week after they were raided by the FBI, they were on the stage of the CPI convention in Chicago, and I got blackmailed. I got phone calls from people. You're going to have to cancel the conference, Caleb. You're going to have to cancel the conference, and they tried to scare Tara Reid out of coming to the convention. They sent her crazy stuff, and they really did not want me to support them, but we did. And we didn't just support them at the conference that we did. We supported them at the United Nations. I even raised their case in Russia. And I'm really proud of all that we have done as an organization, as CPI, to support the Uhuru movement. And they have a base among the population. There are ordinary people in the Black community in St. Petersburg, Florida, and ordinary people in the Black community in St. Louis, Missouri, who take their classes for pregnant mothers, have been part of their prison reentry program, or know somebody who's been part of their prison reentry program, go to their farmers markets to go shopping and get fresh fruit, which you can't get these areas. They talk about food deserts, and because of that, they have a base. And that is what scared the hell out of the FBI. That's what they're afraid of. They're not afraid of hipsters walking through Williamsburg with a sign, "We hate Israel. Israel's not woke. Fuck Israel. I've got pink hair." They don't care about that. They are scared of this. They're scared of organizations that are in ordinary neighborhoods talking to ordinary people, and building up anti-imperialist politics. And that's why the FBI stormed into their building and flew drones into their houses and dragged them to federal court. And I saw that, and that's why CPI went out of its way to support them. And Tucker Carlson, who is becoming more and more anti-imperialist every day, he had them on his show and supported them. And I got to tell you, conservatives did more to support the Uhuru movement than any of these stupid communist groups do. Why? Because these communist groups are all jealous of Uhuru. Oh, you know, they're anyone who accomplishes anything. These communists are professional losers. They know how to lose and hate anybody who wins. Uhuru, their slogan is "We are winning." Every word out of their mouth practically is "We are winning." I was at their convention in April. I was a guest. I was honored to be there. And I'm just going to show you the video, just a brief video from my intervention. This is an organization that has a base among the population. This is a real revolutionary group. Now, they have a specific political line that they only want to organize in the black community, unity through reparations. They want to organize white people to give reparations. They have a different political line than CPI. But regardless, this is what a real revolutionary movement looks like. And this is what the FBI and the imperialists are really scared of.
Experience with this thing that they call democracy has been death, has been murderous, has been brutal, and what have you. Somebody was commenting that Comrade Traore in Burkina Faso, I think, responded to this issue about democracy and saying, we don't need any democracy, we don't want a democracy. And I don't know how Traore understood that question, how he explained that question. We believe that if you understand democracy, if you understand self-determination as the highest expression of democracy, the example that's most often used in European societies is the Greeks. They talk about ancient Greek democracy. This is the standard. But ancient Greek, only 20% of the population was free. 80% of the population were enslaved. And so you say democracy is a form of the state. Democracy for whom? So we hate colonial democracy. The struggle we're involved in is against their democracy. And we're creating a new democracy that conforms to the development of self-determination and the outcome of that. And not just self-determination, but self-determination under the leadership of the African working class. It has a deep and profound class content because it's the working people. I'm not saying this as some empty slogan, but the working people create all the value. All the value in the world is created by the workers. It's not created by bankers, stock markets, anything like that. Working people who put our hands to labor and transform it so that it serves our purpose as human beings. That's what creates value. And so that's who has, and you have this extraordinary contradiction. Socialized production, people who engage in creating the value. Socialized production means people do this collectively, socially. Sometimes they don't even know each other, but they participate in the productive process from various places, sometimes in the same factory and what have you. You have socialized production on the one hand, but then you have private ownership of the means of production. So the people who do the producing don't get anything or get barely enough just to survive. That's what this capitalist system provides for. You can't do more than that. You can't get a better system that stems from colonialism than that. This is socialized production, and then you have private ownership of that which is produced. So people who don't do anything, don't produce nothing, don't produce anything, are the ones who own and control the ability to produce. That's problematic as hell. That's a profound contradiction that is just in human society right now, that even whether it's understood or not, much of the struggles that we see in the world are articulations or effort to reconcile or deal with that contradiction, socialized production and private ownership of the means of production.
Yeah. Brothers and sisters, comrades, we're experiencing the birth pains of the whole New World Order. We are experiencing those birth pains because the American empire is on the decline. The American dollar is on the decline. And revolution in Africa and in the Sahel region especially is on the incline. And then the BRICS groups that have decided that they are looking at other units of currency, that they said the hell.
Comrade Caleb Maupin from the Center for Political Innovation to give a solidarity statement. Uhuru.
Well, I'm really honored to be here. I was just recently in Russia for a meeting. They're forming a new election observation organization, and I was able to participate in some of the meetings. There were people from all over the world. I want to bring greetings today on behalf of my entire organization, the Center for Political Innovation. I know John McCarthy is watching this from home. He really wishes he could be here, and so I want to bring greetings on behalf of John McCarthy. But in light of the FBI repression this organization has suffered, I want to share something. When I first got politically active, when I was about 19 years old, some of the members of the political group I was with, they decided to take me up to Buffalo, New York, and drive me up to Buffalo, New York. And we went to Buffalo, New York, and we sat in the living room of a woman who was well over 80 years old. And she took out the photo album. And she showed us the pictures from the bad old days of McCarthyism. She showed us a picture of protesting out in front of the steel plant after they had fired every single steel worker that was a member of the Communist Party. And they said steel workers have the right to be members of whatever political party they want, Democrat, Republican, Communist, or whatever. And she talked about how she was a teacher, an elementary school teacher at the time, and the next day after that demonstration, they printed her name and address in the town's newspaper. And then the FBI came to the school and they said, is this you? Is this you? And the principal said, is this you in this photograph protesting for the right of steel workers to join the Communist Party? She said, yes. And they said, well, you're fired. A couple years later, she got another job working as a teacher. FBI showed up there. Is this you in this photograph protesting for the communists? Yep, well, you're fired. And that was McCarthyism. And it was during those bad old days of McCarthyism that members of the Communist Party and other revolutionary organizations went door to door in black neighborhoods all throughout this country with a mimeographed piece of writing that was a report delivered by William L. Patterson called We Charge Genocide, where the Soviet Union gave a platform to the Civil Rights Congress to expose the crimes of the American government against black Americans. And even though the communists were functioning under conditions of illegality, they were able to get millions of copies of We Charge Genocide circulated all throughout the United States. Now, the reason I'm bringing that up is because there's an expression. Have you ever heard the expression, generals fighting the last war? Yeah. Well, that's what's going on right now. Because during the Cold War, during the original Cold War, the strategy of the U.S. imperialists was to accuse the countries that were opposing them of being dictatorships and to say, we believe in democracy and freedom. And so all the Soviet Union and China and Cuba had to do was hold up a picture of Emmett Till's mutilated body and say, oh, that's the democracy they believe in the United States. And by exposing the crimes against African Americans, they were able to rip a hole in the imperialist propaganda. And the reason that's important in our time, the reason that's important is because as they geared up for what we're now in, which is Cold War #2, they decided, okay, we're going to get it right this time. We're going to have a black president of the United States. We're going to have gender and race studies at every university. We're going to have every 12-year-old kid accuse their parents of being racist, and we're going to show the world that we are the center of social justice. And that way, when we get ready to attack, why we can accuse Russia of being fascist, and we can accuse China of being racist against the Uyghurs, and we can accuse Iran of oppressing women, and we'll have the moral high ground, and we'll be able to attack countries, and they won't be able to rip a hole in our propaganda, and we'll be able to ride roughshod over the whole world. That was their strategy. And that strategy, if you look at what's happening right now with Donald Trump threatening to destroy entire nations on Twitter and the ruling elite not able to get any public support for their war against Iran, 80% of the public disapproving of it, what's happened is that strategy has failed. And it has failed largely because of the work of this organization. By calling out Barack Obama when he was running for president, with electoral campaigns, but largely with real economic development programs. This organization has ripped a hole in the imperialist attempt to give themselves a woke makeover for propaganda purposes around the world. They've ripped a complete hole in it. Because with real economic development, if you build a farmer's market, you provide classes to pregnant mothers, that's very, very different than renaming a street, isn't it? That's really, really different than putting up a mural someplace. Those are real changes that they can't deliver within their system. And by exposing their symbolic and their visual activities, you've ripped a hole in their strategy. The truth is, the imperialists, they need the Democrat Party. They need someone to talk nice while they kill you. And they need degrowth.
right? They need drug addiction, they need suicide, they need regulations through which they can control business. The only way their system can survive is with massive depopulation and degrowth. But humanity will not be degrown. Humanity won't be degrown. A great socialist named Wallace Wattles, he said, growth is God expressing himself through human beings. And as you can see across the African continent, the Union of Sahel States, they kicked out the French. They said, we're not going to be degrown. And I see what you're doing here in St. Louis, Missouri, and you're expressing the wishes of the population here that is refusing to be degrown. And you've set a real example, and you've heroically stood up to the FBI. And we at the Center for Political Innovation are in absolute admiration of everything this organization has achieved. We stand with you 100% against the FBI. We'll always be with you. Dare to struggle and dare to win. Thank you very much.
And I want to mention Caleb Maupin from CPI. And, you know, I'm just so pleased and proud of this relationship with this comrade because, you know, there are people who told us that we shouldn't work with Caleb and CPI. I don't know how the hell you're going to say that. I mean, when this attack came, CPI, first on the front lines fighting back against the attack that was on us. First out of the gate. And then I saw Comrade Caleb, a video where he was in Russia. And it might have been some youth thing, I'm not sure. But President Putin, Vladimir Putin was on the platform speaking. And I saw Caleb stand up and ask the president about the Uhuru 3. Yeah. And he said, I want to tell you about this case in the United States where we've been attacked because they accused us of working for the Russians. I mean, these comrades have just been on the case, just remarkable. I've seen members of the CPI dragged out of public forums. That's where there are all of these big shot editors of major so-called legacy media, and I've seen them get dragged out because they didn't mention the Uhuru 3. They didn't mention the attack on the Uhuru House. So that's my comrade. That's my comrade. And so the people who said that, some comrades who said they'd not work with us because we were working. This is the white left. I call it the white left behind, but these are comrades who said they won't work with us because we work with Caleb. And we said, bye. So I just wanted to acknowledge this comrade. And I really, really worked hard. I really pursued everything we could to make sure that he tried to get here to this plenary. And he had us at a convention that they had not too long ago in Chicago. They have a publication, their journal, where they report on that convention. And you hear, you know, coming from Caleb and coming from John McCarthy, our dear comrade who represents CPI in most of our meetings, and stop, what am I looking at? Stop Uhuru. You don't mean that, do you? That's not a complete sentence, is it? Okay, Uhuru comrades.
Uhuru. I sometimes will be up late at night. I might get off of a flight and I'll see that there's a live stream from CPI, so I'll log in. I think it was last week, and I was just about to fall asleep. It was like a late night talk, and then I woke up because Caleb says, you know, the word Uhuru, and he starts talking about this plenary here. And then he pulls up a book, and I think I made a comment earlier, and then I see he posted it, and I was like, right on, comrade, right on. And he says to everybody in the chat, he's like, you need to be there. Yeah. Uhuru.
So it's been almost 10 years of my adult life with the movement. I had nowhere to go. I was living in Boston.
But I'm anticipating. But we still have a lot of work to do. And if it's the Congress or plenary or something, we have to do something next year. All right, can somebody help me? By the way, many people didn't know it, but this is the party's flag.
Yeah.
You know, this is
Long live Palestine!
free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Free, free Palestine!
Yeah, that is an organization that they provide services in 2 mostly black cities in America. And while they provide these services, they teach an anti-imperialist ideology about the struggle of the Palestinians, about the struggle of Iran, about Russia and China rising up as they broke out of the Western system. And they have a base. And the problem is that we live in a time where American people know in their bones, it is overwhelmingly known by the American people, 3 things. Anywhere you go in this country, people know 3 things. 1, that our country is run by a group of rich people who do not care about us and are not loyal to this country, are not concerned about making our lives better. 2, those rich people are always taking us into wars around the world, and those wars don't benefit us, and those wars are being waged to benefit them and not us. And 3, at the same time that they're doing that, our living standards are going down and our freedoms are being taken away. Everywhere you go in America, red state, blue state, urban, rural, south, north, Midwest, Pacific Northwest, out west in California, left coast, right coast, west coast, east coast, people know it. People know it. But those sentiments have not been transformed into anything that can actually change things, because podcasts are not enough, because you need an actual organization with an actual base among the population. And that is what the ruling elite are very, very afraid of. And that is what urgently needs to be built. And the reason that CPI doesn't fit in, I'll go on a little bit of a tangent. It's kind of related to the next thing I'm talking about. The reason that CPI doesn't fit in and that we're not communists anymore is because communists don't operate as if they want to build a base among the population, and they don't even really get what anti-imperialism is about, right? CPI, from the moment this organization has been created, our slogan has been out of the movement to the masses. We are not interested in being part of some leftist movement. We want to organize ordinary people to be anti-imperialist, because that is what it's all about. It's about opposing imperialism. And the reason that we're not communists anymore is because in America, any conversation about socialism or communism pretty quickly turns into a conversation about making everyone equal. That's what it becomes about, right? Because we're all taught in school, communism is where everyone's equal. Socialism is where the government redistributes wealth and makes everyone equal. And that's not what we're interested in doing. And if you think that's what communism is, we're not communists, right? Now, my understanding is that we live in a period in which the global economy is run by big banks and big monopolies that want to keep themselves at the top forever. And their system cannot handle the creative power of human beings. We have a God-given ability to reinvent our relationship with nature. No other species is capable of expanding its population, expanding its life expectancy. What human beings have done in just 7,000 or 8,000 years is astounding compared to any other species. Human beings, we have souls. We are not just another animal. We are a creative species, and no AI can do what we can do. And no computer program will ever be able to replicate what we have within us. We are not simply human because we have a piece of matter in our brain a physical thing called a brain. We have souls, and we have a piece of godlike divinity within us. We're not gods, but we have a godlike ability, a godlike aspect that separates us from animals. God is the creator of all things, and human beings were given by God creative ability. And we have reinvented our relationship with nature, and we are always looking to expand our population, expand our life expectancy, and go to a higher plane. And as we do that, we reinvent our social relations. And, first you have a technological revolution where our ability to interact with nature changes. And then that leads to a new class being created, a social revolution. And out of that social revolution then comes a political revolution, because you have a new form of government that emerges to serve that new class that's been created by the technological revolution. And there's many examples. Hunter-gatherer civilization, right? There had never been private ownership of land. There had never been domestication of animals and crops, and a new class of landowners was created, and that new class created a new economic system and capital. I mean, this is the story of human history, reinventing our relationship with nature, and then reinventing social relations to have a new class, and then that class building a new form of government. And we're constantly expanding our population, expanding our life expectancy, and rising to a higher plane. And we're now living in the final years of an economic system that has a big problem, which is that we human beings have gotten into a system where poverty is created by abundance, where people become homeless because there are too many houses, where people become hungry because there is too much food. The creative ability of human beings has outstripped the narrow restrictions of a system where profit dictates production. We need production to be rationally organized, because that's the only way that human creative power can be fully unleashed. The fact that we have private profit in command is holding back our potential as a species. And self-driving cars and food production, we could be living in a world of vast abundance. But because we have a highly irrational economic system, abundance creates poverty. And so we need to overcome that. And that the world we live in right now is run by big monopolies and banks, ultra-rich bankers that have determined that the only way they can stay on top is to degrow. And they've been going all over the world and grinding nations into poverty. Read How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney. Read about what the British Empire did in India. Read about the nation of Nigeria that exports more oil than any other African country, but the people there have a low life expectancy, a high rate of illiteracy, right? That in order to keep themselves at the top and keep this irrational system that is holding back human potential at the top, they have been degrowing countries, grinding nations into poverty. And countries around the world have started breaking out of that system. And it started with communism. It started with the Bolshevik Revolution and then the Chinese Revolution. But now it's gone completely beyond that. And you have Muslim countries that are breaking out. You have Bolivarian countries. You have Ba'athist Arab socialism. You have all kinds of different countries. The Union of Sahel States, Pan-Africanism, all kinds of different countries have broken out of imperialism and started building. Meanwhile, their system continues to become more and more efficient as technology advances. This irrational problem of poverty created by abundance gets worse. And so the only thing they can do is degrow countries. And they've gotten to the point that they can't just settle for degrowing Africa, and they can't just settle for degrowing Asia. And so many countries have broken out of their grip, and their system production has become much more efficient than ever before. So now they're degrowing Ohio, they're degrowing Kentucky, they're degrowing Pennsylvania, they're degrowing New York, they're degrowing Alabama, they're degrowing this country, and they are lowering our life expectancy, and they're turning the first world. It used to be they built up and stabilized the first world while impoverishing the third world. Now they're bringing that imperialism, that destructive accumulation and degrowth home, and they are degrowing the first world. And the only way their system can survive is with degrowth. Meanwhile, if you look at the countries around the world that have broken out of this system, it's not communism in the sense that everyone's equal. It's not communism in the sense that there's no private enterprise and private business. You go to China, there's plenty of private enterprise and private business. You go to Russia, there's plenty of private enterprise and private business. You go to Cuba even today. They're trying to expand the private enterprise. You go to Iran, there's a big private sector, but they have a government that has taken control of major centers of economic power like oil, like natural resources, like electricity, like healthcare, like banking, and it then uses the commanding heights of economy to inject credit into communities. They have a national bank that lends money and builds up and enables people to start their own business. They take control of their natural resources, their oil, and they use the oil money to inject credit into communities and build up communities. And these are pro-growth, anti-monopoly governments that are pro-economic growth. And what they're doing is they are innovationists because they are trying to unleash human creativity. They want people to go out and invent new things and start new businesses and make their community more prosperous. They are an innovationist government. They're a pro-growth government. And that's what we have around the world. We have pro-growth governments. Meanwhile, we have the World Economic Forum, the World Business Forum, Wall Street and London, the Fabians and the Council on Foreign Relations and Walter Schwab or whatever his name is. And all of them are up there saying we need poverty. The only way we can do this, overpopulation, we need poverty. Poverty is the only thing. We got to drive down the population. We got to make them all live in a pod and eat bugs. And so they are trying to degrow. Meanwhile, we have countries around the world that have rejected their system and are starting to grow. And I want that right here. I say we need a government of action that will fight for working families. Instead of having a bunch of private banks that get rich by impoverishing Americans and foreclosing their homes, we should have a national bank that injects credit into communities and lends money to make a more prosperous country. Instead of having Wall Street bankers get rich off of our oil and our natural gas, we should take oil and natural gas and all the energy into public ownership and use the profits from energy and from oil to make our country more prosperous by lending money, by paving roads, by building power plants. In addition to that, we should hire the unemployed people. We should pave the roads of this country. We should build high-speed railway. And then we could invest in our people with an economy where the wealth of the centers of economic power were organized in order to have long-term economic growth. We could invest in our population. We could make sure that everyone is healthy. Why? Not because we're trying to give them a handout, but if we want to have a strong country, we need everyone to be doing as much work as they can and to be as productive as possible. So they need to be healthy. And we'll provide education to people. Again, not as a handout, but because if we're going to have a strong country, we're going to need lots of engineers. We're going to need lots of scientists. We're going to need lots of doctors. And so we're going to have to provide education to our people so that they can be productive and go out and build the strongest country ever. And on top of that, we're going to have to make sure that every person is employed. We're going to need the productive labor power of everyone so that we can create vast abundance and we can have an economic bill of rights. And those 4 points, right? Those 4 points, does that sound like communism to you? I mean, it doesn't to what Americans think communism is. It doesn't mean everyone's equal. No, in fact, I think there'd be a lot more millionaires and billionaires if we enacted this policy. And is that about redistributing wealth? Are we taking people's incomes and redistributing it? No, we're centralizing the economy and we're having an economy that is rationally organized so the growth and productivity of every individual can be unleashed. This is called innovationism. And, you know, it is based on understanding what Marx and others taught, but it's also based on understanding the work of Friedrich List. And it's also based on understanding the work of Henry Charles Carey. It's also work based on studying Alexander Dugin. It's also studying Deng Xiaoping theory. It's also studying geopolitics and Atlanticism. And that we want a pro-growth, anti-monopoly government that unleashes human creative power. That is what we want. And you can call it whatever you want. I don't care what you call it. We call it innovationism. And that's what we're for. And we don't call it communism because this isn't what people think communism is. Communism is about everyone being equal according to what everyone thinks. And I don't want to do that, right? We need to break out of imperialism. Globalism, imperialism is the greatest enemy of humanity. This ultra monopolistic system where the billionaires and bankers keep themselves at the top by making people poorer and poorer and poorer and driving us into more and more wars and gutting and looting our communities and enriching themselves through destroying human life and impoverishing people. That is the problem, and that has got to be abolished. We need a government of action that will fight for working families. That's what the Center for Political Innovation is always about. We are innovationists. That's what we advocate. And we need to build this movement that is pro-growth, encouraging people to open their own businesses, encouraging the roads to be paved, encouraging the prosperity and the wealth and the creative power of people to flow. That's the kind of movement we need, a pro-growth movement against the pessimism and Malthusianism of the dying globalist, monopolist, imperialist order. We need a government that invests in human beings, a government of action that fights for working families, a government that unleashes human creative power, an anti-monopoly coalition. That is what we need in America. And that's what we need to build. And I think a lot of libertarians want that because libertarians want economic growth. They see the government that we have that taxes and makes it impossible to open your own business with all the licenses and makes you pay all kinds of crazy taxes and crushes the small business owner. They want to get rid of that. I think a lot of people that are on the left would want this because they want jobs and they want good union wages and they want communities that have historically been impoverished to be lifted up. I think this is what every American wants in their bones. Every American wants a society where their children are having a social media app that doesn't make them dumber, that doesn't make them hate themselves, that doesn't make them feel insecure, but makes them smarter and stronger and more productive. I think everyone in America wants an economy that finds a way for them to be more wealthy and more prosperous and doesn't grind them into poverty, doesn't rip them off, and you don't have to spend $200 every time you go outside. I think this is what everybody wants. Left, right, center, Christian, Muslim, Jew, atheist, Buddhist, whatever you are, this is what we need. We need a pro-growth, anti-monopoly government, and we need to build a movement for such a government. And the only way we're going to do it is we need to build up community power. And the reason that Thomas Massie lost is because, yeah, a lot of people in his district that are young Republicans that listen to podcasts, they voted for him, but largely the institutions that serve people are controlled by the forces that be. And the people that are just living their lives, they go to church on Sunday, they say, got to support Israel. They don't know anything about Israel. They don't care. Fine. And that's the problem is if we've got to set up shop in communities and we've got to build an optimistic organization. That's what we got to do. Right. And look, the fact that I can't get over this, right? This is one of the biggest ironies. And then we'll move on from the Thomas Massie thing because we got a lot of other stuff to talk about tonight. And if you got anything to talk to me about, please go to buymeacoffee.com, send me a question. Questions are always appreciated. But you can do super chats. We're monetized, but buy me a coffee is the best way to send questions. But regardless, folks, the fact that, it's not just that, and they pointed out that in order to beat Thomas Massie, they had to spend billions of dollars. The Israel lobby did. It's the fact that they did it. Like, why? For years in Cleveland, I lived in Dennis Kucinich's district. Dennis Kucinich was an anti-war Democrat. And he would get up every time they wanted to invade Iraq or put new sanctions on Cuba or whatever, and he would oppose it, and he'd be outvoted. And they would pat him on the head. Oh, you're so cute there, little Dennis. Right? He kind of looked like a leprechaun. He wasn't a leprechaun. He's actually Eastern European. He's not Irish at all. But, it was just kind of like, okay, that's how America is. Most of us support war against countries. Most of us want to put sanctions on Cuba. We got cute little Dennis Kucinich. Oh, look at you. Look at you, you cute little leftist, you. And Dennis Kucinich, Dennis Kucinich was allowed to be part of American politics. They just kind of, they kind of laughed at him. They didn't treat him seriously. And the U.S. Congress overwhelmingly supports Israel. If you look at the map, how many members of Congress get AIPAC money? How many members of Congress are supported by Israel? It's like overwhelming. So why are they concerned? Why did Thomas Massie? Why was it worth it to spend billions of dollars to defeat Thomas Massie? Why? Why not? Why not just let him be like Dennis Kucinich? Let him win the election in his little district in Kentucky and pat him on the head. Oh, you're so cute, little Thomas. Yes, that's right. You oppose Israel. Ha, ha, ha. Why not just do that? Because the emperor has no clothes. Because there's a giant elephant sitting in the living room. And having a member of Congress say what so many Americans know is true and are thinking deep in their bones, that's something they cannot stand. It's a threat. If no one's listening to you, you can say whatever the hell you want. But when your words have power, that's when they become a threat. And it was worth it for them to spend billions and billions of dollars to go there and do everything they could to get this guy who stands up to the Israel lobby, who calls out Epstein and everything. It was worth it for them to boot him out of Congress, as expensive as it was. That's important to think about, right? It's important. They wouldn't have needed to do this. They shouldn't have needed to do this. In the old America that I grew up in, it was considered normal, right? It was considered, you had your mainstream Republicans and your mainstream Democrats, but every 4 years they would have that debate stage, and you'd have Ron Paul, and you'd have Mike Gravel, and you'd have Reverend Al Sharpton, and that was to show there was room in the major political parties for a couple nuts, a couple cranks who don't believe in CNN. But they're so insecure now. They got to get him out of Congress because people are listening to him, because people agree with him. Think about that. Think about that. So don't be demoralized by it. At the end of the day, folks, it's about the balance of forces. That's what it's all about, the balance of forces. And the issue was not that people all over this country don't agree with Thomas Massie. The issue is there's not organizations that can give that sentiment voice and can organize ordinary people to assert their will in the name of anti-imperialism. That's the issue. Now, the second news item I wanted to talk about tonight is about the fact that Raul Castro has been indicted by the U.S. government. This is so stupid. 94-year-old man who led a country in the developing world, a country that has a healthcare system that is the model of the world, has the greatest medical school in the world, according to Ban Ki-moon. A country that sends more medical aid around the world than any country in the world, a country that has universal employment, has wiped out illiteracy, that has done so much for its population, a core country, a country in the developing world, and a country that's been hit with crippling sanctions. But this guy was on a boat, risked his life, was part of the revolution, along with his brother Fidel Castro, and they've now charged him, indicted him. And I did a report on it. I went on RT, did my job as a reporter about it. I'm going to show you my reporting, but I've got some more information about this indictment and how bullshit it is. So this is my RT reporting on it. This is immediately after the DOJ indicted Raul Castro. They gave the official indictment. I was on international TV, viewed by millions of people, right? All over the African continent, people were viewing me, okay? All over, I recently heard, right, through the grapevine, I know people who know people, when Trump and his team were in China recently, they were angry because there was only one TV network in English in their hotel. Yeah, folks, Trump's team was watching me, was watching us, because in Beijing, if you want to watch English language TV, there's only one station in your hotel, and it's us, it's RT. And all over the African continent, any English-speaking country in Africa, people watch RT. India, the second largest population in the world. It's one of the most popular English language TV networks in India. Millions of people. When people don't seem to understand that when I do my reporting as an anti-imperialist journalist, there are millions of people all over the world, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Singapore. People all over the world tune in and watch me every day doing my anti-imperialist work, right? So please do not think for a minute that some streamer bro who's got 500 bots watching him that go, "You are really, really cool. You are really, really cool. You are really, really cool, beast." Don't think some streamer bro is more serious than I am, okay? But anyhow, this is what millions of people watched this afternoon after the indictment of Raul Castro came down.
We are announcing an indictment charging Raul Castro and several others with conspiracy to kill U.S. nationals.
Let's go live to New York and our correspondent, Caleb Maupin. Caleb, good to see you. Yeah, take us through this case being pushed by the US against one of its longtime rivals.
Well, that announcement you just heard in Washington, D.C. came at an event to commemorate the 30-year anniversary of the incident back in 1996. There was wild applause, and now Raul Castro, the retired leader of Cuba, who is 94 years old, is indicted. Now, the incident in 1996 involved Brothers to the Rescue, which is an anti-Cuban government activist group made up of people who fled the island after the revolution. They had an airplane that violated Cuba's airspace. They received multiple warnings and ultimately were shot down, and 4 people were killed. Now the U.S. government is claiming that Raul Castro, who was then not the president, but he was the armed forces minister, and Fidel Castro, his brother, who was president at the time, are guilty of some kind of conspiracy to bring down that plane and kill the anti-government activists on board. Now, at the time, back in 1996, Bill Clinton responded to the incident by passing the Cuba Liberty and Solidarity Act, which increased the sanctions put on Cuba, made it even more difficult for Cuba to import products and trade on the international markets. And this announcement that came at a very well-publicized event, it looked like the whole thing almost seemed like a publicity stunt. It comes as new pressure is being placed on Cuba. Now, Marco Rubio, the U.S. Secretary of State, is himself a Cuban American from Florida, where many Cuban exiles live, and he recently gave remarks offering a new partnership to the Cuban people if they will break with Fidel Castro's heritage. Here's some of what he said.
30 years ago, Raul Castro founded a company called Gaesa. Today, Cuba is not controlled by any revolution. Cuba is controlled by Gaesa, a state within a state that is accountable to no one and hoards the profits from its businesses for the benefit of a small elite. President Trump is offering a new relationship between the U.S. and Cuba, but it has to be directly with you, the Cuban people, not with Gaesa. The only thing standing in the way of a better future is those who control your country.
So these sanctions target an economic organization that is heavily involved in overseeing Cuba's economy and tied in with Cuba's military. And in those remarks, we heard Marco Rubio repeat the claim that the sanctions the USA has placed on Cuba, the blockade, the embargo that has been condemned by the United Nations year after year after year, somehow that's having no impact on Cuba's economy. According to Marco Rubio, their only problem is that communism is bad. Communism doesn't work as an economic system. That is the claim that is being made. Now, reacting to Marco Rubio's rhetoric, we had the foreign minister of Cuba, Bruno Rodriguez, say that it is the embargo that prevents Cuba from importing products, prevents companies that trade with Cuba from then trading with any U.S.-based company. That is ultimately what is responsible for a lot of the suffering on the island currently, and that at this point it seems that beyond just the economic sanctions that have been imposed on Cuba since the 1960s, we now have the United States trying to fabricate some kind of pretext for an invasion. This is what the foreign minister of Cuba had to say.
Without any legitimate excuse whatsoever, the U.S. government is building, day after day, a fraudulent case to justify the ruthless economic war against the Cuban people and eventual military aggression.
Now, the latest oil embargo against Cuba prompted blackouts, fuel shortages on the island. People were going without electricity, without lights. It had quite a devastating effect. However, Marco Rubio insisted it had nothing to do with the United States. It was all simply caused by communism is bad, the standard conservative narrative in America. But John Radcliffe, the CIA director, visited the island of Cuba recently. And from what reports indicate, he called on Cuba to liberalize its political system and to adopt a more market-based economic model. Now, what's interesting about that is that Cuba has been openly trying to adopt a more market-based economic model for the past 2 to 3 decades. Cuban leaders have talked about adopting the Vietnamese model, adopting the Chinese model, moving more toward a market socialism model, as that's more in line with how the economy works in these times. That has been Cuba's stated goal. The reason they haven't been able to do it is because
of an economic blockade by the United States. Now, Marco Rubio has repeatedly said that it's somehow impossible for Cuba to adopt a more market-based model because of the fact that they are led by the Communist Party. He seems to believe that if an island is led by a Communist Party, it cannot liberalize its market economy, as happened in Vietnam, as happened in China. And now we have Donald Trump referring to Cuba as a rogue state and threatening more action against the island. Here's what we've heard from the U.S. president.
From the Gulf of America to the frozen waters of the Arctic, from the shores of Havana to the banks of the Panama Canal, we will drive out the forces of lawlessness and crime and foreign encroachment, just like we've been doing.
Now, Washington has threatened military action against Cuba. We have the U.S. Southern Command moving a carrier strike group into the Caribbean. All of this is very alarming. The recent kidnapping of Nicolas Maduro, the Venezuelan leader, and now an indictment against 94-year-old Raul Castro has people wondering what might come next. Essentially, Raul Castro is charged with having been the armed forces minister at a time that Cuba shot down an airplane filled with anti-government activists that violated its airspace. This is being called conspiracy to kill American citizens. And the USA is saying they have the right to potentially extradite Raul Castro and potentially give him up to what could be a death sentence. So this is the situation in the United States. We continue to hear U.S. leaders insist that all the problems on the island are simply caused by the government, that their embargo that's been condemned widely around the world has no impact. It's all simply the government's issues. And furthermore, that the only way Cuba's economy can improve is if the government is overthrown. That seems to be the Marco Rubio U.S. State Department position, and this is certainly an escalation to see the 94-year-old leader, a founder of the current Cuban government, indicted by the U.S. Department of Justice.
Taking us through that, RT correspondent Caleb Maupin.
Yeah, folks. Now, after that report, I spoke with people that I know that are very familiar with the Cuban Revolution. I learned some wild things. So 1996, what they've charged Maduro with, what they're trying to, in theory, they could kidnap him, just like they kidnapped Maduro. They could kidnap Raul Castro. What they charged him with was shooting down, there were 2 airplanes from an organization, an anti-Cuba activist group called Brothers to the Rescue. There were 2 airplanes that went into Cuba's airspace in 1996, and they were shot down. And he was the minister of the armed forces at the time. Now, what they didn't tell you, and I didn't even know this. This is wild. The reason that Cuba shot down those planes is because the planes that were being flown were airplanes that had been used to spray Agent Orange over Vietnam. Now, I couldn't believe this when I heard it, but I did the research. I mean, this is wild. These were airplanes that the U.S. government had used in Vietnam to spray the chemical Agent Orange. They were purchased by a private anti-Cuba activist group. The Cuban government ran the serial numbers and found out that these planes had been used to spray chemical weapons on Vietnam. And as these planes were flying towards their country, they had to decide, are we going to let our people have chemical weapons sprayed on them or not? And they did what any country in the world would do, and they shot them down. And these planes had already violated their airspace, and they warned them many times, turn around, don't come into our airspace, don't come into our airspace. And they knew what these planes were. They knew they were being flown by fanatical anti-Cuba people, right? One of the pilots on the plane was somebody who had massacred all kinds of civilians during the Civil War. He was fighting against Fidel Castro. He killed all kinds of civilians during the Civil War against Fidel Castro before fleeing to Miami. These are people that have murdered Cubans before, and they're flying planes that have been used to spray chemical weapons on communists in Vietnam, and they're flying towards Cuba, and they did what any country in the world would do under those circumstances. They gave them multiple warnings, and they shot down the planes. That is not a crime against humanity. That is basic self-defense, right? They prevented a 9/11. Right? Imagine that, if the plane had been headed towards the World Trade Center and, NORAD had done their job and shot down the plane before it hit the World Trade Center. That's what Cuba did. A plane that potentially could have sprayed chemical weapons all over the Cuban island. A plane driven by a literal terrorist and mass murderer who slaughtered civilians during the revolution was flying towards their country and they shot it down. That is not something that he should be charged with conspiracy to kill American citizens. Give me a break. The U.S. government harbored Luis Posada Carriles for decades. This was a guy who blew up an airline in Cuba full of school children. And the U.S. government let him stay in Cuba and harbored him, even though he proudly admitted he'd blown up an airline and killed hundreds of Cuban school children. Miami is a nest of terrorists and organized crime organizations. Those are the people that brought you Marco Rubio, or Narco Rubio, as he's known, because some of his family members are tied to the drug trade. And so the idea that they would extradite Raul Castro, a 94-year-old man, and try to drag him to jail like they did with Maduro, because 30 years ago, he made a decision that any rational government under those circumstances would make is more than offensive and more than ridiculous. And I really, really hope that this is just a stupid publicity stunt. They did it at a stupid rally with all these Miami Cubans, right? I've been to Miami, and I was there, and last time I was in Miami was for Trump's court date, and I've argued with these people. They are the stupidest human beings you've ever met. They are just, they'll tell you anything. They just make up the wildest stories. And these people that are just, and the craziest thing, and I've got to say this, right? And again, you're not allowed to say this as a leftist, but I'll say it. The Miami Cubans don't give a fuck about America. They don't give a fuck about America. Okay? I know I'm not supposed to like America either. It's racist. We'll put that aside. Okay? They don't care about America. Do you think those Miami Cubans are thinking, what is in the long-term interest of America? What is America's overall geostrategic interest? How can we get America tied in with the... No, they think, I want to kill Fidel. I want to kill Fidel, and I want to kill my own people. I want to kill the people of my nationality who supported Fidel. They don't give a fuck about America. All they're concerned with is their vendetta against Fidel Castro and how they can go back there and take revenge on the people who took their plantation, the people who were on the other side of the war that they were on the losing side of. That's all they care about. So America first doesn't mean pandering to these people. These people don't care about America. And you know who else doesn't care about America? The Falun Gong. They don't give a fuck about America. The Epoch Times. You think they care about America? I mean, go talk to them on the streets. They don't even speak English. They don't care about America. All they care about is they want to kill the Chinese communists. They want to kill Xi Jinping. They don't care about America. They could give two shits, right? Our country could burst into flames. Every road in this country could be falling apart. All our power plants could go out. They don't care. They just want to fight the Chinese government. And the Shahs of Sunset Park, Reza Aslan, the Shah of Iran. Do you think he cares about America? No, our country is full. Our country is full of people who lost revolutions and have a bone to pick. And they want to take our tax dollars and our money and our American soldiers' lives to get revenge for their family vendetta against some country on the other side of the world. Okay? And forget about communism, forget about imperialism, forget about all that. Just look at this from a purely nationalist perspective. Is it worth it? Is it worth it to have American lives lost in a war, to have billions of dollars in American taxpayer money spent, to cut ourselves off from the rising new economy in the world centered around Russia and China, so that, that Miami Cuban guy can get his revenge and feel like, I got Raul Castro. I got him. It's not in our interest. And this is going to be the weakness. This is one of the biggest weaknesses of Trump, is that he panders to these losers. These people are losers. They lost the revolution. The Shah lost the Iranian Revolution and moved to America. The Miami Cubans lost their plantations and moved to Miami, right? The Falun Gong lost in China, and they packed up and they moved to San Francisco to sell their medicine and whatever, right? These are losers. And our country has become a collection of losers. All the losers from around the world, people who lost the revolution, people whose own, they were so against their own people and sold out their own people to American corporations, and their people got tired of it, and they come to America and they walk around like they're experts on their country. And I will say, I cannot stand these people because there's just something about me. I'm old-fashioned. I'm old-fashioned in that I believe that you should treat your people right. You know what I'm saying? I don't like the American government. When I go to Russia, I don't say, "Hey, Putin, can you nuke America, kill a bunch of Americans?" I don't say that. I want Russia and America to get along better because that would be better for Americans. I'm not a big fan of the American government. When I go to China, I don't say, "Hey, China, can you starve America?" No, I want relations between America and China to get better. That's what I want. And as much as I don't like the American government, I don't hate my country. I don't hate my people. I want America to, I know the only future we're going to have is joining the new economy, getting further away from the British Empire, from the dying old imperialist order. That's why I want that peace bridge over the Alaska, connecting with Russia over the Bering Sea. I don't work against my own people. These people do. The Shah, right? The Shah, this Reza guy, what is his name? The exiled monarch, right? His father, who was the monarch of Iran, who fled. The last interview the Shah gave before he died was all about the Israel lobby. And it was all about the power of the Zionists. Go and look this up. This guy had been the dictator of Iran. He lost the Iranian Revolution. He moved to Texas, and he died in Texas. And one of his last interviews is all about Israel has too much power. The Zionists have all. But that doesn't stop. His father, who was the U.S.-backed dictator, admitted on his deathbed, basically, yeah, it's all the Zionists. They have all the power. But now his son is literally working for Israel. Reza Pahlavi. And it's like he's working and he says, "We love Israel." Your father, maybe he hated the Islamic Revolution, but even he admitted that Israel was Iran's enemy. These people, they hate their own people so goddamn much. No self-respect whatsoever. None. And, Israel blows up an elementary school and kills a bunch of their own people. And they are, yeah, woo! And they want sanctions so their people can't get medicine. And they want, blockade. And they want embargoes. And they want cruise missiles. They want to murder their own people. That's disgusting. I went to one of these rallies years ago, and they were having in New York City an anti-Castro rally. And I went around and I asked the people at this rally, I said, "Do you support the blockade?" I'll show you the video. This is unbelievable. These people were marching against Fidel Castro in New York City, in the streets of New York City. Video is less than 3 minutes. And I said, and their rally, it said SOS Cuba. They care about the people of Cuba. And I said, "Oh, okay. Do you support the blockade?" And I will show you. This is my video. These people hate their own people. Watch. So folks, those of you who may not be aware, there is a huge economic embargo on Cuba. The US government prevents medicine and food and other supplies from getting into Cuba. It's awful. Now, there's a group of protesters here in New York. They're marching behind a banner that says SOS Cuba. And so I'm going to ask them if they support ending the economic sanctions on Cuba, if they support ending the embargo on Cuba and preventing Cubans from getting food and medicine. Let's see if they actually want to help the Cuban people. Let's see what they're really about. So, do you want to end the blockade? Do you want to end the blockade? No, I'm just curious. You want to help the Cuban people, right?
Oh, yeah.
So do you want to end the sanctions and end the blockade?
That's not helping them.
No.
How does that help them?
Prevent them from getting medicine? Prevent them from getting medical supplies? Do you want to end the blockade?
We want freedom. Don't help them.
Now, do you want to end the blockade of Cuba? Do you want to end the economic embargo and the sanctions on Cuba?
No. Freedom for Cuba.
Right, but what about the blockade?
No, blockade is okay.
The blockade is okay?
Yeah,
It prevents
it's
people from
okay.
getting medicine.
Blockade is okay.
Why is the blockade good? Tell me why the blockade is good. So you support the blockade? Tell me more about supporting the blockade.
I don't speak
Cuba!
So do you want to end the blockade?
Cuba!
Do you want to end the blockade, the sanctions against Cuba?
I'm sorry?
Do you want to end the blockade, the sanctions?
No, end the sanction, no.
Why not?
We want to end the communism.
So
the Cuba
but the blockade keeps people from getting
because
medicine.
they want freedom. It's not about
So you don't want to end the blockade?
The blockade had the dictatorship.
The
dictatorship.
The blockade is
I'm
good?
the one who has the blockade.
Okay, so you support sanctions on Cuba. You support preventing your own people from getting medicine. That's what you support? So I just want to be clear, this is a pro-blockade demonstration. You support the blockade? You support the blockade?
So as you just saw, these protesters do not want to actually help the Cuban people. They support the blockade. They were very clear. They support sanctions on Cuba, preventing Cubans from getting medicine, preventing Cubans from getting access to important food goods and medical supplies. They're speaking in the name of the Cuban people, but they're actually in support of preventing the Cuban people from getting food and medicine. They don't really support the Cuban people. These are just pro-State Department activists. These are regime change activists. They want Cuba to be the new Libya. They want Cuba to be the new Iraq or the new Afghanistan or the new Syria. They don't really support their own people. They just want their people to suffer to carry out their political agenda. They don't like the Communist Party. It has nothing to do with helping the Cuban people. You heard them yourselves. Yeah. And so, forget if you don't agree with me about a lot of things. If you're an American, you should be sick and tired of these people, sick and tired of the Miami Cubans, sick and tired of the Israel lobby, sick and tired of the Shahs of Sunset Park, sick and tired of the Falun Gong, sick and tired of the Navalny mafia, all of these foreign lobbyists that come here and they are just interested in a vendetta against their own country and their own people. They want America to kill their own people and to get their revenge for them. They don't care about us, right? And I'm sick and tired of them. And I'm also sick and tired of Americans thinking that these people are honest. They are not honest. These people are liars. They are notorious liars. And people think they know about China. They think they know about North Korea or Cuba or Iran or Palestine or whatever by talking to one of these people. These people lie out their asses, right? And I'm sick and tired. We got to stop. We got to get ordinary Americans to stop listening to these people. They're con artists. They're liars, and they don't care about America. Okay. And so I just wanted to get that out of my system. But anyway, I told you I was going to talk about Thomas Massie. I did that first. Then I told you I was going to talk about Cuba. I did that. We talked about Cuba and Cuban. We talked a lot about Cuba. Now I'm going to get to the big announcement. And the big announcement is coming up. So here we go. All right. Well, it's in a couple parts. Some of you might already know about the first part, but here we go. I got a new book. And this is not just any book that I've published, right? This, I've written many books before. This book is almost 500 pages long. Almost 500 pages long. It is 488 pages long. It has speeches that I have given. It has the text of my conversation with Russian President Putin. It has the text of me confronting the U.S. State Department about Israel and their nuclear weapons program. It has articles that I wrote that were published in North Korea's daily newspaper, Rodong Sinmun. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation. It has pieces I did about the analysis of the Russian economy. It has pieces about Rosa Luxemburg. This is a big book. It is a large book that I have written that is basically an introduction to our anti-imperialist philosophy. And it is now on sale. The hardcover edition is now on sale. Softcover edition should be available in the next couple days. It is now available. I'm very proud of it. Glad that it's out there. You can order your copy. The link is down below in the description. I'll drop it into the chat. I'm very happy that this book is now available. This book is more than just a book, right? This is not just, I have a whole bunch of books I've written. This book is about our movement, right? I am going to show you
some of the graphics from the book. I'm not going to show you all the graphics, because if I showed you all the graphics, then I would be ruining it now, wouldn't I? But like, you know, we have like members of CPI, right? Who we've got special graphics in the book, members of CPI talking about their experience with the organization. Right. This is Gabby, who's in the chat right now. This is on one of the pages of the book. Being part of CPI has been a great journey. In my work with CPI, I enjoy that I'm able to be creative. I can go into the masses of the real working class. This is like, we've got like beautiful graphics like this to go along with the articles. Check this out, right? In addition to, stuff from our own members, right? We've got stuff from the supreme leader, the founder of the Islamic Republic of Iran. This is on one of the pages. Islam is the religion of those who've been impressed and plundered by imperialism. Just a beautiful, beautiful graphic, of the Islamic Revolution. This has got the text of the speech I gave in Chicago a week after the Uhuru movement were raided by the FBI. This has articles that I wrote during the Occupy Wall Street protests back in 2011. This book has a lot of great stuff in it, and we are launching a campaign centered around this book. And so the first part of the announcement is this book and the campaign. I am going on Garland Nixon's show tomorrow, but we need to get me on every show in the world to talk about this book, because this book is about more than a book. And we're going to spend the rest of May and the rest of June. And I have a list of shows to get on. And if you know a podcast that'll have me on to talk about this book, please, by all means, let's do it, right? I want to go on with Glenn Greenwald about this book. I want to go on Jimmy Dore. I've been on there twice. I want to go on a third time and talk about this book. I want to go on every show you ever heard of to talk about this book. And then after May and June, where we are going to pump this book like crazy and we're going to bring the optimistic anti-imperialist message, I want to go on Tucker Carlson. Man, let's make it happen. Let's go after Tucker. Let's send him 1 million emails. Let's text and tweet at him. Let's get on Tucker. I want to go on every show imaginable to talk about this important book that we have just published. But after that, I'm going on tour. I am hitting the road, folks. We're having the Finish the American Revolution tour. I am going to 3 cities. In New York City, July 2nd, we're having an event about this book. Minneapolis, July 18th, we're having an event about this book. July 11th, we are having an event in Los Angeles, in Hollywood, about this book. We are hitting the country because this is the anniversary, 250-year anniversary of the American Revolution. The name of this tour is Finish the American Revolution and the British Empire System and its wars. And we are on the march. We are on the march. We are having 3 anti-imperialist events around the country to commemorate the anniversary of the American Revolution, to build the Center for Political Innovation, to put forward our patriotic, optimistic, pro-growth message. It's going to be awesome. It is going to be awesome. I'm going on the road. Folks, we have got to build a movement. So if you're part of this community, I recommend you go and order the book right now, get your copy. If you want to wait for the soft cover, wait a couple days, whatever. But then we got to start building for these events. We got to start building these events because, the New York City event, July 2nd, we're going to do it. We're going to do it in Minneapolis. We're going to do it in Los Angeles. And it's not easy to put on these events, right? With airfare, it's through the roof right now because the gas prices, and we got to rent the space, and it's not easy. We need to raise money, right? And if you can donate, right, if you can go to the CPI website, CPI USA, and donate, that would be great. Send us a donation to help us put on these events. I'm going to be traveling this weekend. I'm not telling you where I'm going, but you'll see. I'm going to be traveling to an important event this weekend where I'll be representing CPI at a very, very important event that's happening in a certain part of the country this weekend. I'm not going to, go into detail, but you'll find out about it. I'm sure many of you can probably guess where I'm going to be this weekend, but I like to be discreet about these things, not let Antifa know where to find me. We need your support. Right? Become a member of the Center for Political Innovation. Go to cpiusa.org and donate. And this is our campaign that we are organizing. Go to cpiusa.org/donate. we're hitting 3 cities with the Finish the American Revolution tour, a tour themed around this book, Imperialism and Anti-Imperialism, where we are going to have great workshops with new people. People are bringing coworkers, people are bringing their friends. Penny was just out in the streets of Minneapolis. She ran into a friend of hers that she talked to today, somebody in her neighborhood, they're coming. She ran into somebody else, somebody who's a candidate running for local office. They're coming to the event, you know, and it's like, I talked to Chicago comrades, talked to the LA members, you know, they were at a community festival this weekend and handing out stuff, and they're inviting a whole list of people, and we're organizing. We're organizing. This is not a social media phenomenon. We are a real organization, the Center for Political Innovation. And the way you build an organization is you go and you have events and you connect with people and you build and you organize. And that is what we're doing. That is what we are doing. And this book is an organizing tool, like everything I do. And this tour in July is an organizing tool. So I need you to go buy the book. I need you to help me get on as many shows as possible about the book. And we need to have a strong showing in June. And then I'm hitting the road. And if you're in New York, come join us on July 2nd. If you're in Minneapolis, come join us on July 18th. If you are in Los Angeles, come and join us in LA, right? If you're in excuse me. If you're in California, we've got a lot of work to do. We have got an organization to build. The Center for Political Innovation is the organization that we need. We are committed to building, dare to struggle and dare to win. Yep, I'd go on Brianna Joy Gray anytime. If you can message her, get me on her show, I would happily do it. I will go on any show I need to go on, and we are going to get this book into as many people's hands to show them how amazing our community is, how amazing our project is. Candace Owens, I would do it. Yeah. Let's do it. But I need you guys to help me. We got to make this a joint effort. We got to get me on as many shows as possible, and we got to have some amazing rallies in July, and that'll all lead up to our 7-day national training program. So yeah, we got to do it. I don't know who that is, but I don't know why. I mean, just because I disagree with somebody doesn't mean I'm not going to go on their show. I don't know who that is. I'm going to have to Google him. I'm sure he's somebody who, has a bad reputation. That's often a good sign because, yeah, I'd go on that guy. Yeah, I'd go on his show. He's a Trump guy. I've seen his interview with Trump. I'd go on that. Yeah, I'd go on that show. Yeah, I would go on that show, right? Let's do it, right? Let's get this book everywhere, and let's fill up the spaces that we rent for the July events. Let's build our organization. It is time to go, folks. It is time to go. I am ready to roll. I am ready to go. I am ready to organize. We have got so much we have to do. I see with the threats against Cuba, the war against Iran, we have got our work cut out for us. We have got a project that is so important, and nothing is going to hold us back. We have got to just keep organizing. So, I'm going to do the roll call after this, and then we'll start answering questions. Here we go. Yeah, that's us. We are the Center for Political Innovation, and we are killing it, and we are building, and we are the future. So yeah, names and locations, folks, names and locations. We're going to do the roll call. And then after that, I will start answering questions. The first questions I will answer are those that came via Buy Me a Coffee. If people want to do super chats, I'll do those afterwards. Rumble rants, but yeah, best way to send your question is to go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. A number of people have already sent questions. I'm going to answer them. So there you go. Buymeacoffee.com, Caleb Maupin. Names and locations. We got John McCarthy in Chicago. Good to see you, brother John. Ryan in Kansas City. Ian in the Yukon Territory up in Canada. Very good. Very good. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Nebraska, Chase, Jared in Virginia. Good to see you, Jared. Names and locations. Names and locations. On the road, David Fox, Patch in Arizona. Good to see you. Good to see you. Good to see you. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Who is with us? Anthony in Detroit. Good to see you, good sir. Gabby in Chicago. Good to see you, Gabby. Names and locations. Names and locations. The South. Huey Long. Good to see you. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? California. Oh, California. Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us? Who's with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Anybody else tonight? Brentwood. Good to see you, Brother Paul. Names and locations. Names and locations. Anybody else with us tonight? Anybody with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who's with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us tonight? Montreal. Good to see you. Fakibofu. Good to see you. Penny. Good to see you, Penny. Always doing great outreach. Always good to see you. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Who is with us tonight? Names and locations. Who is with us? Who is with us? Names and locations. Names and locations. John in Florida. Good to see you, John. Good to see you. Anybody else? Names and locations. Names and locations. Going once, going twice. Names and locations. Names and locations. Names and locations. All right. Well, just a reminder, if you got a question, the best way to send it is to go to buymeacoffee.com/Caleb Maupin. But you can also Rumble Rant. You can also super chat me. No one's done that so far tonight, which is fine. Penny, very good. But yeah, send me your questions. And we got some Rumble Rants from Penny that are in the chat. And we got some Buy Me a Coffees. So I'll start with the Buy Me a Coffee that came in before the show even started. We'll start with that. The one that came in the other night. And this was the first question we got. It was on buymeacoffee.com. Someone wrote, regarding what the Talmud says about non-Jews, most religions speak down upon non-believers. I'm an atheist, not a Jew, by the way. But let's call Israeli Zionist Jews the Jewish ISIS. After all, ISIS does consider Shias subhuman. Shia Muslims, Karaite Jews, and certain Christian groups do on paper are very unfriendly to non-believers. American evangelism, Wahhabism, Zionist Judaism explicitly treat non-believers as swine. In many ways, Zionists are basically ISIS, which is better PR. I mean, Israel, ISIS, Air Force. Okay, there's one little problem with what you said there. I mean, I agree with you, right? I would never blame an entire ethnic group or even an entire religion for what some of the fanatics associated with that religion believe. There's just one little problem with that. One little actually I have to say here, which is that that the difference that you gave out there is that certain forms of Christianity, certain forms of Islam, they demonize people for their beliefs. Right? They hit people for their beliefs. Judaism, the way Zionists practice Judaism, you can be an atheist, but if you are ethnically a Jew, you're still a human, right? And that's the difference, right? You're right that that ISIS Wahhabis say that if you practice the religion of Shia Islam, you're a Shia apostate, you're a non-human. But they don't say that because of your race. Right. And that's the difference, is that the Zionist ideology and the Talmudic perspective is not people who agree with us and have our beliefs are human, and people who don't have our beliefs are not human. It's people of our ethnic group, even if they don't believe, are human, and people not of our ethnic group, no matter what they believe, it's more racial. Now, to be fair, right? And I this is one thing that we don't realize as Americans, right? And even America used to be like this, but like for example, in the Middle East, and I mean in Ireland, tell us about Ireland, right? In Ireland, if you're from a certain neighborhood and you have a certain last name, you can never have been in a church in your entire life, and you are a Catholic. And in Ireland, if you're from a certain neighborhood, you have a certain last name, you're a Protestant, even if you've never been in a church your whole life, right? And that in a lot of the world, it's like that, right? In the Middle East, if you're from certain neighborhoods and certain communities, you're a Shia. You're from certain, and actually in Lebanon, the way their constitution is set up, like seats in parliament are assigned to religious groups. They call them the confessions, right? And they have so many seats that are assigned to Shia and so many seats that are assigned to Alawites. And so it's, it's like that in many places. In the West, increasingly now, and as a Christian, I'll tell you, I think this is a good thing. We're becoming a much more secular society, and I think that's good because religion is now a choice. If you are forced to believe something, or you believe it because you're kind of forced to, you don't really believe it. But if you choose to believe something, your belief is much more sincere. I would rather have people choose to believe in God than believe in God because everybody else does. Well, I don't know, just because, you know what I mean? And honestly, the reason that I was so anti-religious as a teenager is I was in an evangelical conservative area where people believed just because. And it was very annoying because there were basic facts people didn't think about. And there were, conversations people had, that were not very deep because people just, and that, when belief is required, expected, it's not as sincere as belief that is, a choice. And so the reason religion is changing so much in America is because people now more than ever in American history have had to choose it. And that's what atheists don't understand. And I will say this is one of the strongest arguments for the belief in God. Since the new atheist movement, since the rise of the internet, since Richard Dawkins and all of that, and especially since the pandemic, church attendance is way down. Okay, it's true. Church attendance is way down. The number of people in America who call themselves atheists is way up. And it is now kind of respectable in America to say you don't believe in God. We're much more secular than we used to be. But yet, among young people, and this is just a fact, among young people, church attendance is on the rise. And among young people, the most popular podcasts, one of the most popular topics that young people listen to in social media is religion. Young Americans want to know about Christianity. Well, they want to know about Islam. They want to know about Judaism. They want to know about Buddhism. And, there are waves of young people during the pandemic who converted to Islam because they listened to podcasts about Islam, because there were waves of young people who converted to Russian Orthodox Christianity because they listened to podcasts about it. And that doesn't fit, right? The atheist argument is, people just believe this because they're conforming. But once people don't have to be religious, once people don't have to believe in God, they're going to stop believing in God. And they're just, no. Actually, now that people are free to believe in God, they're believing in God and they're fascinated by religion and they're believing in God in ways they didn't used to. It used to be, I remember, this is another thing, right? And I'm not Catholic. I don't understand Catholicism. But, I remember, when I moved to New York City, there's a Catholic TV network on the airwaves in New York City. And you turn it on, and the ads to join the Catholic Church, they don't say become a Catholic. They say come home, right? It's assumed, the ad is assuming that you're Irish or Italian or Eastern European or from Latin America. And it's saying basically you grew up at the Catholic Church, you can come back. They're not even trying to recruit people that aren't Catholic. It's just assumed that, okay, among people that grew up this way will appeal to their nostalgia, come home. That was their ads. Well, now it's not coming home. Young people are converting to Catholicism in big numbers. People who grew up in Protestant families, people who grew up in secular families are converting to Catholicism. That doesn't make any sense. And people, because people want God, and I do believe in God, and I didn't believe in God when it was mandated, when it was required, when being God was something that people did for stupid, non-thinking, conforming reasons. I wanted nothing to do with it. But when I was in situations where I had to think about my life and my motivations and my purpose and what is right and wrong, I was able to reconnect with Heavenly Parent. And that was an amazing thing, right? And I'm very, very spiritual and very open about my spirituality, but I would never have gotten to this place if I was still in a situation where I felt I was being compelled to do it against my will. And again, I feel that faith that is not compelled, and faith that is based on listening to podcasts and thinking about things and asking questions, is a much more sincere faith than faith that is simply, well, that's what everybody else is doing, I guess I better do it. One thing I used to always hear when I was in college, I was an atheist, and I would tell people that I was an atheist, and I would always get the same response from people. People would say, well, if God doesn't exist and I die and I don't believe in him, nothing happens. If God does exist and I die and I don't believe in him, I go to hell. So I should probably believe in God just to be safe. And I would always say to them, that's not sincere belief. That doesn't count. If you're believing in God to hedge your bets, you don't really believe in God. Right? I love my wife. And what if my wife said to me, Caleb, do you love me? And I said, well, the consequences of not loving you are blank, but I'm married to you. I'm married to you. And so if I didn't love you and we were married, but then if I do love you and we're married, so based on the cost benefit analysis, do I really love my wife? If that's how I'm thinking? No. Right? And so when people say, when people give me this argument of, well, you're better off believing in God, because I'm like, that's not how these things work, right? You don't believe in something because of cost benefit analysis, right? And so that argument in and of itself would annoy me. Like, how can you be making this argument? That does not constitute belief. And that was one of my critiques, but it was just something people said without thinking. Right? It was, why do you believe in God? Well, the benefit of, if you don't believe in it, you go to hell. But if you, it's like that's not sincere. Right. And I've come a long way with all of this. And I must admit that, anyway, I mean, we could talk about all these things, and, I really don't accept the dialectical materialist philosophy. And I think that a lot of the evil things in communism and a lot of the evil things that I've seen among American communists have a lot to do with dialectical materialism. Right. Today, I'll just throw this out there. Today, there was a friend of mine, a longtime friend, not going to say who he is, but, he reached out to me. Hey, I'm in a jam. Can you help me? I helped him, and he blew me away. He made a big post. Oh my God, Caleb helped me. He didn't have to do that. He probably shouldn't have done that because there's so many haters in our mutual circles. But anyway, he made a post. Caleb helped me out. I'm glad to help out a friend, whatever. Good thing. He made this post, and one of these communists who knew me in a former communist group just couldn't hold her tongue. And below this post he made, thanking me for helping him as a friend when he was in a jam, leaves a post about, well, Caleb is a Nazi, Caleb is a fascist. And I'm just like, why? And this person claims to support Cuba. And I literally had just gone on the air to speak to millions of people across the world and talk about Raul Castro and the indictment against him in a way that they would never hear on CNN, never hear on Fox. I'm on there. This woman claims to support Cuba, has been to Cuba as a Cuba solidarity activist. And yet, I help out my friend, and she writes below it, that Caleb's a fascist. He's a what is wrong with these people? Why do they act this way? Well, I believe they act this way because there's a bitterness. If you think the universe is defined by conflict, if you believe the only way to advance things is fighting with people, if you believe there is no God and there is no spirituality, all that exists is matter, and that matter is constantly clashing, things get ugly pretty quick. And China says the Cultural Revolution was a big mistake. And a lot of the communist countries say that, we had this struggle, dialectical materialist perspective, and it didn't go well. It didn't go too well. You know, and you know, I look at the way I was when I adhered, or at least tried to adhere to that school of thinking, and there was so much bitterness, and there was so much rage, and so much resentment. You know, and so you know, I mean, you have to learn to love, and you have to learn to give yourself and put yourself into the hands of a higher power, and that you cannot find happiness through struggle. You just can't, right? Karl Marx said, what is your ideal? He was given one of those question things. It's actually weird. It's like, I remember when the internet first started, they'd give you questions to fill out. If you go back into like the 1800s, there's one of those things where Marx, he was describe your heroes in history, describe your fate. And one of the things they asked him, what is your ideal way of being? He said, to fight. That was his ideal way of being. Well, there is joy in struggle. There is joy in standing up for what you believe in. I'm not putting that down, right? There is joy in struggle. But if that's all you're going for is confrontation, that's a very, very cold way to be. And you know, that's not how it should be. There should be forgiveness in this world. And when Jesus said, turn the other cheek, if someone strikes you on your right cheek, turn your left cheek, right? If someone takes they take a shirt from you, give them 2 shirts, right? And that responding to people's hate and people's bitterness with kindness, right? And forgiving people who have wronged you, and repairing relationships that have been damaged. All of this, I mean, there's a reason that the Bible it speaks to so many people. There's a reason that Jesus's work is so desperately needed, and that as much as I do believe in justice for the downtrodden, and I do believe in struggle and standing up for what is right, that worldview that defines everything by confrontation leads to a certain bitterness. But anyway, I could ramble about that all night. People have their questions. But anyway, so I feel like I answered someone's question, but I think he sent that question again, if I'm not mistaken. I think he sent it again. He said, so sorry, I'm the atheist from earlier. I do think that Karaite Jews, Shia and Sunni Muslims, and liberation theology Catholics, I think they have more or less understanding certain non-believers. I'm an atheist. I'm an American. I believe in your right to believe. I'm not offended, dude. You can be an atheist. I was an atheist for many years. I don't hate atheists. I really don't. There's probably many people that are watching this right now that are atheists, that are good people, that do want to do right, that have empathy in their soul. They just the idea that there is, some God, that is the creator of all things, they just don't buy it, right? And I was one of those people, and you have the right to be that way. And I believe that as much as I think that it would be good for you to believe in God, and I think that you could find a level of fulfillment and happiness by reconnecting with God, I don't think you are necessarily a bad person for not believing in God. And, in some ways, I've heard that, well, anyway, I could go on about that we've talked about religion too much tonight. So moving on to the next topic, right? You don't have to apologize, atheist from earlier. It was a good question. Very good question. Now, Paul said, what are your thoughts on Massie forming an independent third party with Marjorie Taylor Greene and others for a broader appeal coalition of other true dissidents? I think that's right on. That's what we need. That is what we urgently need, right? And that is the real test. Look, AOC is willing to work with Zionist Democrats, is willing to not vote against Israel's Iron Dome. And when asked if she would team up with Marjorie Taylor Greene to oppose Israel's war in Gaza, called Marjorie Taylor Greene anti-Semitic and said she would never work with Marjorie Taylor Greene. Now, explain that to me. It's okay to work with people who support genocide. It's not okay to work with people who don't support genocide because they're right-wing. But it's not just AOC. It's also the Party for Socialism and Liberation. Party for Socialism and Liberation, they called the Rage Against the War Machine rally. They called it Nazi and white supremacist. They won't work with Republicans, but yet they opened the door to Kat Azbagaba, whatever her name is, the activist in Chicago who supports Ukrainian Nazis. They rolled out the red carpet for her, but Marjorie Taylor Greene is not okay. And it's just there's a section of both sides, really, I guess you could say. There's a section of the right that says, okay, maybe we're against Israel, but we'll never work with socialists and leftists. They're all dirty commies. And there's a section of the left that says, okay, yeah, we're against these wars, but we never work with Marjorie Taylor Greene. And both of those sides are frauds. They're not really against the wars, right? Right? And that both of those sides, they're there to PSL and the people on the right-wing camp that do the same thing. They're there to keep people that are smart enough to oppose these wars attached to the pro-war parties. That's what they're there to do. And it's not, I'm not opposed to voting for a Democrat or a Republican. There may be times that it's strategic to vote for a Republican. There may be times it's strategic to vote for a Democrat. There may be times it's strategic to boycott elections. There may be times that it's strategic to vote for a third party, right? That every situation, it just depends on the circumstances. I'm not opposed to it in principle. But at the end of the day, though, that these forces that say, oh, we're against bombing Gaza, we're against what Israel's doing in Gaza, but you can't work with Marjorie Taylor Greene, they are not really there to stop the bombing of Gaza. They are there to pull people that are smart enough to oppose the bombing of Gaza into the Democrat Party that is facilitating the bombing of Gaza. And the people in the Republican camp that say, okay, we oppose, what Israel's doing. We oppose the war in Ukraine, but we'd never work with leftists or socialists, that Caleb, that Jimmy Dore, they're nasty commies or whatever. We'll never work with them. They're not really there to oppose the war. They're there to pull people that are smart enough to oppose the war into the Republican Party. And they're not really sincere. But those who are willing to say, look, I will team up with people on the other side to actually stop these bad things, that's because they actually want to stop these bad things, right? They're not playing political games. AOC is playing political games. And there are people on the Republican side that are playing political games. Now, it's a little more complicated because Trump is the one actually doing the wars. And so it's a little bit more complicated. But yeah, if you're not willing to work with people you disagree with, and if your position is, yeah, I'm against this thing, but the other side is so abhorrent and so horrible, then you don't really want to stop the other thing, right? The Party for Socialism and Liberation and AOC are more against Republicans than they are against Israel. They're more against Republicans than they are against Nazis in Ukraine. They're more against Republicans than they are against war, right? And there are people on the Republican side that are more against Democrats or more against leftists than they are against wars. And Raul Castro, who is saying, look, I want to team up with Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie to stop these wars. He is revealing that he actually wants to stop these wars. And that's why he's willing to do that. So that's what we need to remember. That's what we need to remember. And look, in 1864, the right thing to do was to vote for a Republican, Abraham Lincoln. If Abraham Lincoln had lost the 1864 election, that would have been an absolute disaster, because then the USA would have signed a peace treaty with the South, and the South would have seceded from the United States and maintained slavery, and that would have been an epic disaster, and the British Empire would have had a foothold on the American continent, and the Confederates were already starting to seize parts of Central America, and it would have been a disaster for the entire. It would have been a disaster. In 1864, Abraham Lincoln, a Republican, had to win the election. It just had to happen. And in 1936, Roosevelt, a Democrat, had to win the election. If Roosevelt had not won the 1936 election, right, and he had just passed his New Deal and the sit-down strikes and the Social Security, and if he had lost the election, we would have been on the wrong side of World War II, potentially. We never would have gotten Social Security. Roosevelt was positioning himself as a Bonapartist who supported labor unions. If Roosevelt had lost the 1936 presidential election, that would have been a disaster. A Democrat had to win in 1936. Most of the time, it doesn't matter who wins the election, right? Bush versus Kerry, the first election I was heavily involved in. Honestly, it didn't really matter who won that election. John Kerry's position was he was going to send more troops to Iraq. He spent his whole campaign basically psyching up his anti-war voters to be more pro-war. He turned his campaign, even though he had been an anti-war activist, his whole campaign was centered around, I fought in wars. He began his campaign saying, John Kerry reporting for duty, and his actual platform was to send more troops. It didn't matter. If John Kerry had won, the USA would have kept occupying Iraq. Nothing would have changed, right? When Obama was running against Mitt Romney, right? In, Obama versus Romney in 2012. If Mitt Romney had won, nothing would have changed. The USA would have kept going with its war. I mean, it would have changed very little. Most of the time, it doesn't matter. My position, my personal position, not the position of CPI. There are people in CPI who disagree with me. First of all, we don't participate in elections. That's the first thing. And second of all, not everyone in CPI agrees on everything, contrary to what you've been told. We have many disagreements among us, and that's fine. But my position during the recent election in 2024 was that it was better that Trump won because he was promising peace, even though a good chance he wouldn't deliver. That Kamala Harris was running on a platform of, I will censor free speech and I will keep fighting in Ukraine to the last Ukrainian, and we're going to crack down on conspiracy theories. And that basically Kamala Harris was running on a platform of defending the foreign policy establishment. Trump was going around speaking against it. And he had people in his campaign like Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, and others that were speaking in ways that were critical of the U.S. establishment and were part of his campaign. So it was better that he won, even though he didn't deliver, because that registered public opposition to the foreign policy establishment. Even though Trump got in and didn't do anything that he said he was going to do, the fact that people voted for him to do good and he did bad is better than people voting for Kamala Harris to do bad and she does bad with a popular mandate. I still think that was the right position, but it's getting harder and harder for me to say that now. I see it's so awful what Trump has done, but this isn't what people voted for. And Marjorie Taylor Greene and Thomas Massie, they said that. I will say that this stuff wouldn't be happening right now if other people had done what CPI did and boosted the peace message. If the Rage Against the War Machine Coalition had stayed intact, right? If other people had been out there with Trump and Kim banners and getting the Peace MAGA message out there, things might not have gone the way they did. And also, there are, as bad as things are right now, Thomas Massie and Marjorie Taylor Greene, huge members of the Trump camp, have stood their ground and opposed Trump. Joe Kent, who was the counterterrorism director of the government, quit and protested this. Tucker Carlson, who was the top TV host in the world, is loudly condemning all of this. So, the fact that the peace camp, when did this happen? When Obama was president, Obama said no new wars, and he bombed and destroyed Libya. Name one Obama administration official that quit in protest of what Obama did in Libya. They didn't. Name one Obama administration, name one prominent liberal that Obama was on Twitter threatening, calling them losers because they were so loudly condemning his foreign policy. It didn't happen. So I think that our work amplifying and boosting with the Rage Against the War Machine rally that in 2023 that we sponsored with our Peace MAGA campaign in October of 2024, I think it made a difference. I think the fact that there is such a loud opposition to these wars within the MAGA camp, I think it has something to do with our work. And I'm proud of what we did, that we got in New Yorker magazine, we got in USA Today. My book on Kamala Harris exploded during the election and went viral. I think we made a difference. We didn't stop Trump from doing these wars, but we spoke to his followers and we inculcated an anti-war message among his base, so much so that many of his base didn't go along with him betraying his war promises. I think that's an achievement. I am proud of the fact that we distributed thousands of copies of my book on Kamala Harris outside the Democratic Convention. I am proud of the fact that we were in the streets with "Only Peace Can Make America Great Again" and Trump and Kim shaking hands. We did the right thing and we have nothing to apologize for. Now, you wonder if we had done something else, but honestly, coulda, shoulda, woulda, given the circumstances that we were in. That's the amazing thing about CPI. We don't have thousands of members. We don't have millions of dollars in budget, but with our little resources, we do so much. We have found a way to make our impact dramatic. We have the ability to impact the conversation like nobody else. And, on the one hand, I want to say that's because we're so amazing, because we are. But on the other hand, it's like these other people don't do shit. These other groups don't do shit. They don't do anything. They don't do anything. I mean, it's amazing to me how many people kind of agree with what we say, but don't do anything. Why weren't they out during the election? Where's their book on the Houthis that they distributed in bulk everywhere? Where are they doing anything? They're not changing the conversation. They're out there. We agree with you. You know, we make podcasts, and people that already agree with us listen to the podcasts. Oh, good for you. I'm sure the people that already agree with you even more after they listen to your podcast. You know, we're out there trying to use whatever energy we have to push the conversation, push public opinion in a good direction. And if you join CPI, we will put you to work. And look, it's like one thing that I have promised myself I will never do is suppress people. Right? I will try to get people to do things well and do them correctly. But, you know, Noah, he's doing the Juche study group. I try to talk as little as possible. I make the occasional comment, but I'm letting Noah do that, right? Penny is doing amazing videos. She's given speeches all over Minneapolis. I mean, she's given a speech every time I turn around. Penny's given a speech about the Union of Sahel States and innovationism and the Peace Bridge. She's always doing amazing public speaking. She's out there giving speeches to groups of people. She's written a book about Ibrahim Traore. I'm constantly telling people, I want you to do more. I want you to speak more. I want you to write more. I am not trying to make it all about me and hog the spotlight for myself. I do a lot, and I'm not going to stop doing what I do. Right. I am going to, you know, give it all I got. I'm going to do my best. I just wrote a great book. I hope you all read it. I'm going on tour as soon as I can. Right. This is the new book. Please get a copy of it. This is the tour, you know, that I'm doing. I'm not going to stop doing what I do, but I'm not trying to suppress people. Right. I'm not trying to silence people. Right. Then I want you to find your voice. That's the introduction. Noah wrote a brilliant introduction to this book where he talked about what he sees as the strength of my leadership abilities. And that is that I try my hardest to find people's strengths and amplify them, right? I try to make the people who work with CPI into the best activists and organizers that they can be, right? You know, read it for yourself. Go read Noah's introduction for yourself. Go read it for yourself. But yeah, that's what I do. So anywho, next question. Shay said, do you think communist parties and Christian churches establish themselves in the population similarly? The group that feeds and clothes and shelters can preach in a way the masses will actually listen to, actually create an ideological counter-hegemony. Hegemony can be best established by the feeding and clothing people. The French Revolution could happen because the bourgeoisie became better able to make bread for the peasantry and the noble clergy. The Russian Revolution because the Bolsheviks fed better than the clergy. I think it goes back way deeper than that. Go and read The Foundations of Christianity by Karl Kautsky. Karl Kautsky talks about the church as an institution emerged largely because of the Roman proletariat. That in Rome, there were people that were slaves and there were people that owned property. And Rome is the first place in history that you had wage workers, proletarians, men of no property. And as the men of no property emerged in Rome, you had homelessness and unemployment. That had never existed. Slaves are never homeless. They are never unemployed. They also have no rights, and they are they are someone else's property. But, you know, that you don't have unemployment in a slave society. But in Rome, as they started to have a proletariat, and they had a crisis of homeless children. And Christianity emerged as the religion of the Roman proletariat. And they built orphanages for children, and they organized guilds, and they worshiped Jesus the carpenter. And that's why the Gospels were written in Greek, because they, you know, in Rome, they didn't speak Greek. They spoke Latin, but many of the proletarians were Greek, and many of them were Jews from Palestine. And that Christianity became a world religion because it went to the capital of the world at the time, which was Rome, and it proliferated as the religion of the proletariat, the wage worker. And part of that was the wage worker, as they became more and more impoverished, had to take care of each other. And Christianity was a religion that said, you know, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And Jesus said the two greatest commandments are to love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and to love your neighbor as yourself, right? And that Christians were motivated to care about each other. That the two main schools of thought in Rome at the time were they had what was called hedonism, which was Romans pursued pleasure as the highest good, and then you had what was called Stoicism, which was a kind of glorified masochism. Romans that tried to find spiritual enlightenment by self-harming, by whipping themselves, by starving themselves, by taking drugs. So that's basically, you had sadism and masochism. The hedonists were all about living for pleasure, and in ancient Rome, the way they got pleasure was often hurting other people, right? Gladiatorial shows, chariot races, torture, slaves, etc. And then you had masochism, which was the Stoic movement, which was, you had these guys like the philosopher Seneca and others who went around saying, oh, life, you want to find meaning in life, whip yourself and, starve, don't, starve yourself and torture yourself. That's the way you can find meaning in life. And that both of those perspectives were wrong. And Christianity came along as a philosophy that said the way to find meaning in life is through living for the sake of others and connecting to other people and loving and connecting with other people and also loving God. And so, if you read The Foundations of Christianity by Raul Castro, who was an atheist, he gives kind of a Marxist interpretation of the origin of the Christian church. And at the time that he wrote that book, as soon as Marxism came into existence, it was labeled a religion. And if you read what Nietzsche wrote about socialism and Marxism, they said this is nothing but Christianity. This is just Christianity. And that, they called it the church of the working class or the cult of the working class. And Marxism was labeled. It was just considered to be a new, reinvented, ultra-scientific version of Christianity, right? That's basically what it was considered to be. So what you're getting at there, Chase, it is so much deeper than what you're saying. You are right 100%, but it's so much deeper than that. Like, the church is the church because it kind of served a purpose that a Marxist or proletarian organization might serve in a different time. As soon as Marxism came into existence, it was being labeled a church. And then the original Marxist group, the biggest Marxist party prior to the Russian Revolution, was the German Social Democrat Party by Raul Castro, and they wrote a whole book basically saying we are a modern version of Christianity. It's a really good book called The Foundations of Christianity. So what you're speaking to is true, but it is so much more true than that. It is so much more true than that, than what you're getting at. And it's that, and it's the whole thing about, when I go on about the tendency of the falling rate of profit, and I go on about the problem of overproduction, Marx was wrong about a lot of things. He was wrong about, he thought the socialist revolutions would happen in Europe. He was wrong about the Mexican-American War. He was wrong about many, many things. But one thing that he was right about was that capitalism requires that production and tech become more and more efficient, that technology constantly advance to make production more and more efficient because of the competition. But what that leads to is less and less role for workers at the assembly line, and the purchasing power, the ability of the worker to buy back the product he produces, becoming less and less, and the rate of profit that the capitalist makes on the product becoming less and less, and more economic instability. And the more that technology advances, the more unstable capitalism becomes because of this built-in problem that they constantly have to revolutionize the means of production, the technology. That Marx was absolutely right about. And that is one thing I am thankful that I learned. And Marx was 100% right about that. And I mean, he didn't invent it. Other people were saying similar things. He kind of compiled it all into one text. But, Fourier said it, and other people said it. Robert Owen said it. Other people that were criticizing capitalism started to notice poverty amid plenty, overproduction. Marx didn't invent this stuff, but he compiled it. And ultimately, Capital, and especially the later volumes of Capital, Grundrisse and Theories of Surplus Value, that's what he's getting at, is that the more technology advances, the less and less stable capitalism has become, and the more and more desperately poor people you're going to have. So then if you read the books of Marxist economics that I learned Marxist economics from, you read The Future is Up to Us by Nelson Peary. You read if you read High Tech, Low Pay by Sam Marcy, if you read Low Wage Capitalism by Fred Goldstein, they're all basically saying, right? If you read Dialectical Economics by Lyndon LaRouche, I think maybe he changed his view later. I don't think he necessarily believed this towards the end of his life, but read what he wrote in this book, right? Lyndon LaRouche's Dialectical Economics. If you read, Socialism, if you read Fascism and Social Revolution by R. Palm Dutt, you read the books that I learned Marxist economics from. All of them are pointing to this reality that capitalism has this built-in problem of overproduction, and that what will come of that is there will be more and more poverty and unemployment among the working class, and the working class are going to have to take care of each other more and more and more and band together to assert their own interests more and more and more. And it is from those organizations that are formed among the working class that become more and more necessary as the economy and the situation gets more and more unstable. It will be eventually those organizations that they form out of necessity that take control of the government and force the government to centralize the means of production and liberate the means of production from this problem, right? That is what Marxist economics teaches, okay? And that fits what you are saying like a glove, right? Because you're saying that, the church is this organization that took care of people. Marxists are going to have to take care of people. That's actually the idea if you read it. Now, to be fair, right, there are criticisms that can be made, right? One thing you have to watch out for is that, you become an NGO. Nelson Peary, I really respect his work. The organization that emerged from him, he started what was called the Communist Labor Party, that's now called the League of Revolutionaries for a New America. And they basically just run a bunch of nonprofits that get, funding from big foundations. You would never know that they're communists. They have some of those books in the back room. And, is the work that they're doing really, anti-imperialist or whatever? I mean, I don't know. I've worked with people in that organization. I respect the work that they do in the community, the Detroit Welfare Rights Union. They do amazing stuff and all of that. But are they building some kind of anti-imperialist movement? Are they educating people about Marxist economics? I don't think so. So, but they got to keep the money coming in, right? They got to, check all the boxes and apply for their grant funding. So there's a danger, right, that you can get caught up in, if you become a community service organization, that your ability to be a revolutionary organization gets decreased. And that's something you got to be careful about, right? That, there is a trap of becoming a liberal NGO. And that's something to be careful of. So, these are all things you got to think about. But anyway, I hope you found that interesting. And Chase, what you're getting at there, you were very, very correct. Now, DJ bought me 4 coffees, which I appreciate. That's great. Thank you. He said, do you believe the internet and the increased speed of business transactions, such as instant ordering and payments, could reduce or eliminate recessions from the business cycle, aka smooth it out a little bit? No, I believe it will do the opposite, my friend. I believe that as technology advances and they don't need a bank teller to take your money, and it's going to lead to less workers being hired and the amount of wages paid out in the process of production going down and the amount of profit that can be extracted going down. It's going to lead to these problems. Look, I'm going to show this video. It's one of my best pieces. Shout out to Peter Coffin, who edited it together. It's really an important piece where I talk about this problem that the capitalist mode of production has, the tendency of the falling rate of profit and the problem of overproduction. And, I'm going to show this. All these things you described should be good things, but we have a highly irrational economic system.
Explain what needs to be explained, what used to be considered Marxism 101, about why it is that our Western capitalist economy is crashing and burning. And in order to do that, I'm going to have to do some math. And I hate math. Do you know why I hate math? Because I grew up in America. I went to public school in the United States of America, so I am going to, at risk of embarrassing myself, because math was never my best subject, I'm going to do some mathematics here on the board for you to explain the problem.
I very much enjoyed Caleb's speech.
So if you are creating a product, right, if you're a factory owner, you're making a product, you are going to need the material through which that product is made, the manufacturing materials. So that'll be A.
The simple equation you put forward to explain the crisis of overproduction and the falling rate of profit.
And you're probably going to need to transport the product to where it's sold. That's B.
It broke down where your money goes.
You're also going to have to pay your labor costs. Labor costs are represented by C.
Explanations of those concepts that people are able to understand.
Then when consumers purchase the product, they're going to pay a final price. And that final price is D. However, there's a problem with that.
I like the fact that he framed it that way to make it very clear.
Which is that the capitalist can't change how much A costs. He can't change how much B costs. So the profit of the capitalist can only be extracted from the value put into it by the worker. And this is the basis of Marxism, the understanding of surplus value.
I've never seen it explained so simply anywhere. I've never been able to explain it that simply.
So C, the labor value, is divided. You have C1, which is what the worker actually gets paid. And then you have C2, which is the profit that the capitalist makes. And it all adds up to D, which is the final cost of the product. Now, the way people in the United States who talk about Marxism generally talk about this is they say, well, this is unfair. They say the worker is not getting paid the full value of his labor. But they're missing one of the most important points, which is not just that it's unfair and then people argue, well, what about the employer? He put up the money, doesn't he deserve to be? That's all a distraction. Because the important thing to understand is this. C1 is always going to be less than D. The wages paid out to the worker are never enough to buy back the product that he produces. There is always more products created than there are wages paid out to the worker. And this is the built-in problem of capitalism, the problem of overproduction. And it is always there in the capitalist economy. It never goes away. And they have invented all kinds of crazy mechanisms to try and deal with the problem of overproduction. Part of the reason that the US government has purchased billions and billions of dollars worth of cheese only to bury it in a cave in Springfield, Missouri, is to deal with this problem. It is an ongoing present problem, and it's a problem acknowledged by most capitalist economists. John Maynard Keynes said the problem was underconsumption rather than overproduction, but he was pointing to the same problem. The military-industrial complex in the United States is an effort to deal with this problem, to keep spending going. There's all kinds of mechanisms that they've invented to try and resolve this problem, but it gets worse. What is the capitalist always trying to do? He wants to maximize the amount of profit he makes. And one of the main ways they do that is with what's called labor-saving technology. Get rid of workers and replace workers with machines. As they eliminate workers from the process of production, as there's fewer and fewer workers involved, as machines take the place of workers, the role of C in production decreases. There's a little bit of a problem with that. As C goes down, C2 also goes down, right? As C decreases, C2 also decreases. And as the role of the worker in production is reduced, the rate of profit that the capitalist makes goes down. And this is called the tendency of the falling rate of profit. Only human labor creates value. And this is something that Adam Smith acknowledged. This is something some of the popes even acknowledged. Human labor creates all value. And so when you reduce the role of human labor in production, the amount of value created decreases, and the ability of the capitalist to extract surplus value also decreases. So this causes the capitalist to have to churn out even more products because he's making less and less of a profit on the overall product. He's making less and less of a percentage, so he has to churn them out. So this problem of the worker never being able to buy back what he produces and more products being created than are necessary, this problem becomes exacerbated. And this points to what is understood to be the deeply irrational nature of the capitalist system.
Yeah. So, yeah, unfortunately, the way our economy works, yeah, all of that should, that you raised, DJ, it should make life better and the economy more stable. But in our highly irrational system, it does the opposite. And that's the problem, right? And again, this is why I don't call myself a socialist or a communist anymore. I'm concerned about that. And I want a centrally planned economy so that growth can be unleashed. That's what I want. And anytime you start talking about socialism or communism with people, it just becomes an argument about making everyone equal. And I'm not interested in that. I want central planning of the means of production. I want an economy that is organized to serve society overall. And I want to unleash human growth and productivity by getting over the irrationality here. Now, Chase sent another super chat. Buy me a coffee, he sent in. He said, what do you think of Antonio Gramsci? What's his philosophy? Explains why so many Americans follow Ayn Rand neoliberal ideology without noticing the political ideology, just reality or just the way things are. I think Gramsci was very good at articulating this, but I think he's neglected. All right, well, here's the thing about Gramsci, Chase. Gramsci, a lot of what he wrote. So first of all, who was Gramsci? Gramsci was the leader of the Italian Communist Party in the 1920s, right after it was formed. And what happened is in 1922, Mussolini became the fascist dictator of Italy, and the Communist Party was outlawed, and they took Gramsci and they put him in prison. And he was in prison for a long time. And in prison, he decided that he would write a lot of essays about art and culture and the way capitalism distorted art and culture. However, he wrote these essays in code because if he was writing about socialism and communism, the prison censors would rip up his letters. So instead of saying communism, he said the theory of praxis, right? And what is praxis? Praxis is a word that, the prison guards certainly didn't know. What is praxis, right? Praxis is, I'm even looking for the correct definition of it, but it's like the practical application of theory. So he called it the theory of praxis, which is what we're doing, right? Trying to change society, right? He uses this vague word, the theory of praxis, instead of saying communism. And he never says proletarian. He never says working class. He never says bourgeoisie. And his focus is on art, music, academia. It's on the cultural sphere. And it's written in a way that he never spells out anything in a blatantly communist way. It's all kind of vague. That's Antonio Gramsci. And now, a lot of what he said is true, I guess. The arts are not generally my focus, but, you can see that art and culture is generally influenced by who's paying for it. And I mean, I don't disagree largely with anything that is attributed to him. Here's the thing. He wrote his notebooks, and they weren't published or anything. In the 60s, though, Antonio Gramsci's work was published and translated into many languages. And the guy who oversaw it all was Pete Buttigieg's father. And that was part of the CIA. It was part of the Congress for Cultural Freedom program. And now if you go to college, you will read Gramsci in any of the humanities. And when I was in college, I studied history, and my history classes, they'd have quotes from Gramsci. I studied philosophy. They'd have quotes from Gramsci. Gramsci is just, required. And, he's like the one communist who wrote, and you would never know he was a communist. In fact, most people who read Gramsci have absolutely no clue that he was a communist. And it's communist ideas written in a way that would never lead you to become an activist, would never lead you to become a communist, would never lead you to become an it would lead you to, his theory is like, we're going to infiltrate cultural institutions. We're going to push the envelope. I mean, it's all about how we can subtly push back within the arts and within academia against the prevailing narratives. He's not writing as a mass organizer. He's writing as an Italian communist who's in jail, trying to figure out how we can still influence things for the best, despite conditions of illegality that make it impossible to actually go out and preach communism. And the CIA made him popular with their Congress for Cultural Freedom program. And now it's a big part of academia. And, the problem, here's the thing. There's a lot of young communists who become communists in college, right? And so they love Gramsci because you learned it in college, right? But at the same time, there's a reason you get Gramsci and you don't get R. Palm Dutt. You don't get William Z. Foster. You don't get anything that actually would lead you to become an activist. Gramsci is not going to lead you to become an activist, and it's all very subjective, and it's all focused on art and culture. You don't find the tendency of the falling rate of profit and overproduction in Gramsci. You don't find basic Marxist concepts. You find a lot of wankery about art and culture and how art and culture influence people, how you can push back in the art and cultural sphere. That's what you find in Gramsci. And it's one of these spin-offs of communism that is very useful to liberalism and to postmodernism. Jordan Peterson says a lot of good things, but he says a lot of things that are very helpful and useful when he's talking about normal stuff. When he starts talking about politics, he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. One of the phrases that Jordan Peterson uses, he says, postmodern neo-Marxists. Well, that's an oxymoron. I mean, Marxism is a philosophy that says that objective reality exists. It is a philosophy that says some things are true and some things are not. It's actually a philosophy that goes as far as saying there is no spirituality. There's only one objective reality. There's only material reality. So Marxism is a philosophy that says there is truth. It's not in the eye of the beholder. And postmodernism is a school of thought that says there is no actual truth, and that anyone trying to define actual truth is a totalitarian, right? That the modernist philosophies, communism, fascism, liberal democracy, Christianity, they all were trying to define truth. Postmodernism says truth can only be reached through deconstruction. We must take apart grand narratives in order to reach truth. And that attempts to impose truth are totalitarian. Well, Gramsci is helpful to postmodernists because as a Marxist, he deconstructs, and I've got his prison notebooks. I've read through different parts of them. Some of the stuff he says about sexuality, and some of the stuff about like factory work and the peasantry, and it's interesting, right? I mean, it shows you that, industrial society was very different than, we're in like an era where, people aren't working in factories, but, that the way industrialized Italy was organized is very different than the way that art and culture was, and the way the peasantry in the countryside were, and the way people, it's very different. But regardless, right? He says a lot of interesting things, but he's deconstructing the modernist narratives. And that's useful because postmodernists believe in deconstruction. Postmodernism is an ideology that you can't build a mass movement on the basis of, because it says mass movements are totalitarian, right? And so Gramsci was pushed because he's helpful to postmodernists. And you're saying, isn't Dugin a postmodernist? Well, Dugin says that postmodernism is useful because it gives Russia the ability to say we have a different way of being than the West, right? And he says that rather than trying to say, well, our way is universal, and that, the West says the Western way is universal, and Russia says, well, we don't want to accept the Western way. Dugin says, well, postmodernism gives Russia the ability to say our reality is different. That's a different context, right? But yes, Dugin draws a lot from Heidegger and things like that. And I'm not Dugin. I mean, he also rejects the notion of historical progress. That's very essential to what I believe. Dugin is Dugin, but I would argue that one thing I would agree with Dugin on is that the liberal philosophy of the West, which postmodernism is a big part of, which, free market capitalism and social liberalism are a big part of, that philosophy very much has utilized elements of Marxism for its own ends, which are very different. Most of the people promoting Gramsci have no interest in building a mass movement, that would overthrow capitalism. That very well may have been. Chase, I'm telling you that Gramsci was a communist, and Gramsci in theory believed, that we should organize society. And he believed what I'm preaching on here, but I'm telling you, most of the people that use Gramsci is somebody who can be used to push something else. Chase, that's what I'm telling you. Right. And yes, Dugin, uses Gramsci to say that Russia has, its own way of doing things that's separate from the West. There are different ways of reading into these things. You asked me what I think of Gramsci. I'm telling you about Gramsci. Great. Okay. All right, now I have 2 videos from Penny I need to show, and John sent a super chat. So John said, Russia and China issued an important joint declaration supporting the multipolar world. That they did. I saw that, Putin was just in China, right? Just after Trump, Putin went to China, and for some reason, that link that you sent, John, doesn't work, but it is a very important declaration, and people should check it out. And look, a multipolar world is coming, and I mean, it's sad to see the desperate viciousness of the enemy. Look, the world, we need to find win-win cooperation. And, the only future America is going to have is connected with Russia. And that's why little things like building a bridge over the Bering Sea can be very, very important. They can be very, very important because they inch us closer to the new economy and further away from the dying old Western economy, right? And the more we can be tied in with what's going on in Eurasia, and the more we can be further away from what's going on in the West, in the dying, NATO, globalist Western powers rooted in a colonialism economy, the better. And even if it's a little thing like building a bridge, it gets us a little bit closer. Anything that we can do to get out of the dying unipolar Western system must be embraced, even if it's a little thing, right? And this bridge has been something they've been talking about for years. Let's do it. Let's move ahead with this bridge, create lots of jobs in Alaska, get us closer to the Russian Far East, to China, to North Korea. Let's do it. Let's do it. Let's build that bridge. Let's do it. Let's do it. It may seem like a little thing, and there's probably a lot of American imperialist capitalists who would be for it because it would benefit their profits, but it would inch us closer to the world. And that putting forward great construction projects and plans to improve electrification, to improve water access these are ways of doing things. So Penny sent 2 videos. The first she sent was China's AI program to deal with autism. So let's put it on. This is China's autism treatment program with AI.
In a quiet corner of Pingdingshan, it's class time for 4-year-old Ling Ling. While most children her age can be already quite chatty, Ling Ling still struggles to pronounce basic syllables. Difficulty with speech is just one of many challenges for Ling Ling, who has autism spectrum disorder. She is one of millions in China. Like so many others, the condition is deeply frustrating and often leaves her on the margins of society.
因为送幼儿园，就像老师之前给我说过一句话，说我希望我教过的孩子不能说数一数二，但是不能说太落后，不能像他一样。这是他跟我说的话。
Now Ling Ling takes lessons at this local autism rehabilitation center. The exact cause of autism and a quote-unquote cure remains a mystery. But therapies like this have proven helpful, and lately her family has noticed a significant change.
他以前反正就是不喜欢上课，就是可能1节课30分钟，他从送进去都在哭，一向哭到下课。但是自从上这个课，我发现他很喜欢上这个课，他很开心。
The new class is called Rise AI, named after the software the school recently adopted. Ling Ling's teacher Ren Xiaojuan uses it to plan lessons, track progress, and get new ideas.
来告诉你，你可以
对，
试试
真的啊，对，Rise AI 就是这个功能。
Even with 20 years of experience, Ren Xiaojuan is amazed by the AI's guidance.
Rise AI 呢，它注重的是什么呢？它很明显的就是不要把一个孩子当成动物教，要把就是特别是孤独症的孩子当成人来教，然后而是通过游戏化、活动化教学，然后他进步也特别快。对。
Even in this digital age, the knowledge gap between smaller cities and top-tier cities can be stark. More than 1,000 kilometers from Pingdingshan, where Ling Ling and teacher Ren live, is the team behind Rise AI in Shenzhen, China's Silicon Valley. The company operates a nationwide network of autism intervention centers. To train its teachers, it has experts like Dr. Zheng Tian.
My official title is the Board Certified Behavior Analysis at the doctoral level.
She's one of just 3 senior supervisors at the company with that credential. Across China, specialists at this level are even more rare compared to millions in need. The company has long wanted to capture and scale the expertise of people like Zheng, but lacked the technology, until the arrival of the AI boom.
在这个 DeepSeek 诞生之后呢，就 DeepSeek 一出现，大家发现，哎，确实我们可以拿到一个非常棒的开源的模型。剩下的，比方说像亚马逊这种技术本身啊，给到我们一些支持。
All was in place, and the final piece of the puzzle was the company's own invaluable data. Real-world records teaching some 30,000 students, accumulated over a decade. With parents' consent, the data was fed to the AI, and it learned to make decisions and offer suggestions just like a human supervisor. As the company hoped, all that expertise is now finally reaching those who once had no access to it.
让大家明白2个功能。
Back in Pingdingshan, Teacher Ren is hosting a weekly meeting on making the most out of the tool. One colleague recommends the picture book function. A student couldn't help but pulling out her hair in class, so the teacher asked the AI to make a little story, featuring a little crow, the student's favorite animal, and her feathers.
他这个行为问题就减少了很多。
真的啊？
对，
这么神奇？
是。
The AI system is a significant investment, but for the school's manager, it's proving worthwhile.
第一个颠覆了我们传统康复的一些理念，第二话就是其实变相的去提高我们整个机构的一个康复水平。
For Teacher Ren, this job is personal. When she had fever as a child, her mother tried an unproven treatment that caused only pain but no cure.
不好意思啊。
Unfortunately, such suffering is still happening today.
因为康复起来它是一个慢过程嘛，家长就觉得扎扎是不是会好一点，然后就所有的方法都想去尝试，就是吃药啊，包括现在我们有些孩子还在吃药，还在扎针，但就是你说也就是特别是我们3、4线城市，你说家长也。
Ren says her ability to speak convinced her mom to stop, something her students cannot do.
自从我说了那句话之后，我妈就不给我扎了。但是这些孩子不会说话，他不会表达，所以就一直扎。
This deep empathy is what drives Ren to empower her students. Now, AI is helping her to do that more effectively.
All right. And Penny sent one more video. Creative solution to gas prices. So we'll put that on. I think it's some kind of comedy thing or something. And then I got to go because it's getting late and I have to do Garland in the morning.
I am inside my infamous Barbie camper, the Barbie Jeep.
This custom-made pink Jeep is Molly Hightower's answer to high gas prices. It's a far cry from his Mercedes-Benz convertible. But instead of $90 to fill up with gas, he says the Barbie Jeep cost around $3.
Gas is getting too high, so I gotta do what I can. I can't do my regular cars. I gotta do my little mini cars. So if I can get $1 on pump 6, that'll be great.
Gasoline now costs an average of $4.50 per gallon, according to AAA, which is up from around $3 before the Iran war started. And Americans are looking for ways to save. Hightower is a handyman from Ellenwood, Georgia. He stuck an engine from a power washer into this broken Barbie vehicle, added a rack for groceries, and with one pull of the ripcord, he's off to the races. It's just one of his homemade mini cars.
It's actually quite easier than you would think. I started with a go-kart, then I found the power wheel frames, and then just kind of went to upgrading it from there as far as making the motor bigger and faster, adding lights, music, a tablet screen, everything that you would pretty much see in a real regular car. you can buy it and throw it in one of these and make it like a real car for you. So that's just kind of been my process throughout the whole time I've been building them.
But driving with knees up isn't for everyone. Many Americans are choosing to drive less in their real cars while running errands.
That'll be about $65.
Opting instead for public transit or staying close to home. While Hightower is choosing his own unique solution.
That was depressing. I thought that would be funny, and it was just sad. No degrowth. Human beings will dare to struggle and dare to win. I got to say goodnight, folks. I'm getting towards the end of my rope, and I got to get to sleep. So thanks, everybody. Come back again. I'm sure I'll be on here tomorrow night or the next night or whenever. So dare to struggle, dare to win. New upsurge in the struggle against U.S. imperialism is now emerging throughout the world. Ever since World War II, U.S. imperialism and its followers have been continuously launching wars of aggression. But the people of various countries have been continuously waging revolutionary wars to defeat their aggression. While the danger of a new world war still exists, and the people of all countries must get prepared, revolution is the main trend in the world today.